Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Harris?
Here.
Commissioner Cush?
Present.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Here.
Commissioner Commissioner Rather?
Here.
Commissioner Stevens?
Present. Thank you. We are in a different location tonight, and it would be very helpful if people who are speaking would speak directly into the microphone so that everybody can hear on TV what's going on here tonight. We have the minutes from our last meeting that were mailed out after that. Is there a motion for those?
Mr. Chairman, I find that the minutes are in order, and I move for their approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Harris,
Second.
second by Commissioner Cush. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is going to be to fill a vacancy for the 10th District County Commissioner. We have 3 applicants for that position, and I believe they're all here with us this evening. And without objection, I will call them up to the podium one by one based on who turned their application in first. And then when they're here, they will give us a few minutes about themselves and why they're applying. And then if anyone has questions for the applicants, if you want to go ahead and ask those while they're up here as well. So the first applicant that we had was Mr. Anthony Johnson, and he's making his way to the front. And we certainly want to thank everyone who did apply. It's always a difficult decision when we have to make one like this, but we do appreciate all the input that we had from you on that. Mr. Johnson, if you'll come forward to the podium and speak directly into the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Anthony Johnson. I'm a former county commissioner for the 10th District, serving Smyrna, Laverne. I was here for 17 years. I saw that Commissioner Turner had resigned, so thought I'd put my name in and see how it falls out. I know some of you don't know me, but if you've done your homework and talked to people around the county, I think you found out that I did my job while I was here. Unfortunately, didn't get to stay as long as I wanted, but would like to resume that position. Got many things accomplished in the 17 years I was up here as far as the commission did. I, as one, of course, don't feel like I got anything done, but I contributed, and that's what it's all about, is to do your best and support this county. And that's what I did, and that's what I would like to come back and do again. I'm very much in favor of supporting school system. We have a great school system, but it can always be better. And the only way it can get better is with the support. Fire and police, very important, but the big thing now, and the big thing when I was here before, was the landfill. We've got to do something. Everybody in this county has to do something about the landfill. It's a big problem. Always has been. We just have to get something done. And I see that you've started, but it needs to be put on a fast track for sure, and help the citizens of this county, especially the Walter Hill area, because they've had that headache for a long time. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Johnson? Commissioner Harris?
Mr. Johnson, how long have you lived in Rutherford County?
All my life,
How long have you lived in District 10?
basically all my life.
You say I kind of, I think you answered my question. I'm going to go answer it anyway. And also, these 3 questions go out to everybody, so all the next ones answered as well. What do you feel is the #1 problem this county faces?
I think so. It's definitely the landfill at this time, has been for quite a while. In my opinion, that is the #1 problem right now.
Any other questions? Commissioner Rather?
Mr. Johnson, you said you served for 17 years. When was the 17-year up? What year was that?
I came up here in 1993. served until, well, it was the election, I guess it was 2000.
Have you run since then?
No, sir.
Not run again
No,
since
sir.
then?
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Our next applicant is Mr. Wayne Blair.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the steering committee, commissioners. Good evening. My name is Wayne Blair. I live at 111 Kelly Drive in Smyrna. I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate your consideration. If you will, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I am a native Rutherford Countyan. I am grateful to this county community for several generations of my family to grow and prosper here. My early education was in the Smyrna and Laverne school and public schools, of course. I graduated from Smyrna High School and graduated from Middle Tennessee State University. I am a small business owner, and with my partners, we share the duties of management, human resources, and sales effort. I've earned a number of certifications over the years in my industry, and I have been in my industry for 34 years. I'm a member of, I have been a member of several community committees over the years. I am particularly proud of being a past president of both the Laverne and Smyrna Rotary Clubs. I continue to serve on the Rotary Board of Directors presently. I have been elected to the Rutherford County School Board for 3 terms. I served as chair, vice chair, and the representative to the board for advocacy to the federal and state legislative efforts. I continue to be a strong proponent of public schools, but I understand that this position takes a much broader view than just the school system. Also, I'm proud that I earned the certification with the school system as master board member. And anyone that has tried to attain that certification, it was an ordeal, but it was well worth it. I served on the Tennessee School Board Association Board of Directors for 6 years. I was the elected president of the TSBA in 2017, and TSBA represents almost 1,000 school board members across the state. Again, as I said before, this certainly takes a much broader view than just the school system. I know more about trash here over the last few weeks than I ever thought I would in trying to read and get caught up on what you're contending with presently. There's certainly challenges, and I have been one to meet challenge. I'd like to think that my school board members that I served with will tell you that I was always prepared for our meetings. I did my due diligence. I was well-read. I was thoughtful and willing to make the hard decisions. But I hope my reputation precedes me in that even during those times when I was part of the minority vote, that once the vote came down, I became and supported the majority decision. So this would be something that I have the energy to do, and I would love the opportunity to represent the 10th District and to work with you in solving some of the issues that we have before us. And I'm available for questions also.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Blair?
Mr. Blair, how long have you lived in District 10?
I think 20 years. Prior to moving to Smyrna, I lived in Laverne for several years. But I was born in Smyrna eons ago, and I am a Rutherford County native.
Commissioner Cush?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Blair, with your vast Board of Education knowledge and knowing that the vast majority of our tax burden goes to schools in one fashion or another, what do you think you could bring to the commission in terms of being on that side of the fence, let's say, for all those years as a school board official or member? What could you teach us and educate us in being on that side of the fence and now on the folks that have to raise taxes and make those hard tax decisions? How do you think you could help us?
I am aware of some programs that are being looked at presently. I did watch the Health Ed Committee meeting. I was unable to attend, but I do know that Mr. Spurlock had conversations with you to have 3 commissioners on a committee or task force, if you will, to look at year-round multi-track. About 25 years ago, I was on that committee with appointed by Dr. Ragsdale to look at multi-track schools. Former Director of Schools Don Odom was also on that committee. He went to Orlando and looked at the system, and as far as what became of that program, I was not on the board at the time. I was just part of the committee and learned quite a bit about multi-track. I know that some of the system has changed now, but it's certainly an option that has to be investigated. And I know the school system is also looking at that. Another option is something Rutherford County schools are doing presently, and that's virtual schools, taking the higher achieving students and trying to do an off-campus site. It might be at the library, it may be at their home, but this would be more for a higher achieving student. Also, there's 7 periods. I think it's 22 credits to graduate. They can earn potentially up to 28, which would free up an early graduation, and that would free up seats too. So those are just a couple of the options that I think not only the school system's looking at, but the commission would be, and I would keep an open mind for those type options.
Commissioner Reed?
Mr. Blair, another part that I think that I wanted to ask you about, as our county continues to grow and our population grows, what do you see some of the needs that we have as far as public safety is concerned?
I am aware that our communication system apparently is inadequate for all of our agencies and first responders to communicate with when there is a county-wide emergency or a community emergency. So I feel like the communications situation is probably at a critical point. There's some other issues that I'm not familiar with yet, but I will try to become more in tune with in the future, and that's our fire protection system, throughout the county, and trying to make sure that our sheriff's department is funded as best we can.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners.
Now, our final applicant is Ms. Brianna King.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brianna Daniel King, and I am currently residing in District 10 in Laverne, where I recently moved just within the last month, although I am definitely looking at living there long term. I grew up in the Chattanooga area and watched as Chattanooga went from a place where you don't want to be at after about 4 p.m. to the vibrant city that it is now, with I believe, a solid basis for recycling in the community. And I've watched just a lot of growth take place in Chattanooga over the years. And it is definitely my passion to bring that to Rutherford County. I have been in the Rutherford County area since coming up to Middle Tennessee State University, where I graduated from. So I've been in the area for over 10 years and watched some of the struggles that the county has faced and continues to face with the landfill situation, as well as our population growth and the way that has impacted our school system. And those are definitely some key issues right now. And I feel that I bring some knowledge to the table that other candidates may not bring. I have a background in alternative education forms such as Waldorf and Montessori. I'm familiar with both of those, and I believe that integrating some of those into the public school system would be beneficial in the long run, as well as opening the door to a lot more at-home education. I believe that education starts at home from the moment of birth, and I think we definitely need to engage parents more in the education of their children throughout their schooling.
Any questions for Ms. King?
Ms. King, looking at your paperwork here, so you are a graduate of Middle Tennessee State University.
Yes.
And so how long have you lived in Rutherford County?
More or less since 2008.
Okay, all right. So 10 years. All right. And again, talk to me a little bit about your community involvement other than your work.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some of your community involvement.
So I've been involved in community organizations that educate parents on a variety of topics that impact children through using peaceful parenting techniques. That's definitely a big one.
Okay.
And then I've also gone through baby loss family advisor training, which allows me to work with mothers and families that are experiencing miscarriage, stillbirth, and early infant loss.
Okay, all right. So what is your passion about being on the county commission?
I definitely want to serve the people of Rutherford County. That's something that I've been really passionate about since coming up here to go to MTSU for school. Mm-hmm. And I would definitely like to further that to the fullest degree that I can.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, Ms. King. Is there a motion on how we should proceed?
Chairman, I call for a motion for a vote.
Yeah, I'll second that.
And how exactly do you mean you want to nominate all three?
I'd like to start with 2 and then work down to 1.
Okay, so each
We'll start off with like voting for 2 of the 3 and then down to 1.
okay. Is that your second, Commissioner Cush?
Yes, it is. So so a simple majority of whoever has the most tick marks would be the
I think after the first round, what he's
After the
saying is the lowest
Yeah.
one would drop out, and then we would vote again and
Right.
see who gets the majority on that second vote.
Very simple majority.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 votes to advance. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, Ms. Secretary, please call the roll.
Wayne, Blair, and Johnson.
Mr. Blair and Mr. Johnson.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Mr. Blair and Mr. Johnson.
Blair and Johnson.
Blair and Johnson.
Commissioner Stevens,
Blair and Johnson. Okay, so then we need to vote again on this round to see which one of those two will make it. That's between Mr. Blair and Mr. Johnson. Are we ready?
Before, Mr. Chairman, may I
Oh, sure.
speak? I would like to thank Mrs. King for applying and applaud the fact that as a how do I politically correctly say this? As a youthful resident of Rutherford County, I applaud her interest in local government and would like for her to continue to pursue that. Where is she? There she is. I couldn't see you behind the lantern. And apply for everything you can. There's all kinds of committees, planning commissions, city and county. Just keep the fight, okay? So don't be discouraged. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, call the roll.
I'm sorry, what are we voting for one now?
I thought our motion was to then select the next round with just one.
So this is a single vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Commissioner Stevens,
Blair. So 6 for Mr. Blair. Mr. Blair, your name will be presented at our county commission meeting next Thursday night. That's the 14th, I believe. And so if you were here to answer any questions that there might be, and well, again, we appreciate all the applicants. It's very difficult to put your name out there in public like this, and we do appreciate all the interest, and we have so many opportunities to serve, so please stay involved and please continue to apply. Our next agenda item is filling a vacancy on the Industrial Development Board, and we're going to have many applicants for this, and before we begin, I was wondering if the committee had any recommendation on how to move forward with this one. We had a process that worked a few months ago, and is there a motion for how to proceed with this many applicants?
I will, Mr. Chairman. In similar fashion as to last time, I believe last time we let each applicant address the committee to have up to 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll make a motion that the applicant addressing the committee have up to 2 minutes, and then each member of the committee would then select 3 applicants in a similar fashion as we just did to move to the next round with the highest voting totals moving forward. And then if it gets more complicated after that, I'll continue with a motion to go on.
And a simple majority would be
Simple
required
majority, that would
to
be
move
correct.
forward to the full commission.
Right.
So have a motion by Commissioner Cush. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Reed, second that. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to call these applicants again in the order that they were turned in on our iPads here. So each nominee or each applicant will have 2 minutes to speak, and I'll keep time on my phone to be sure that we follow the rules there. So if you would come to the podium when you're called and give your 2 minutes, then we will move forward. So our first applicant is Mr. Paul Long.
Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Paul Long, and I was here last January, or a couple of months ago, when the last vacancy occurred, and I shared with you then that One of the motives that enticed me to run or put my name in for this position is I do want to see the county continue to grow and develop, for the simple matter that I've got children and I've got grandchildren, and I'd like to see them be able to stay in Rutherford County for the rest of their lives. You know, I hope to stay here the rest of mine. In addition to that, though, in addition to just simply seeing more and more development in the county, I think we need to have an eye towards good development and proper development. I shared with you all in an email leading up to this meeting that during my tenure as county finance director, I had the opportunity to work on several different industrial development proposals, one of which was the Dell Corporation proposal to locate a site out at what is now the Medical Center Parkway development, the Avenues Mall. And quite frankly, we concluded that was not a very good proposal and it wasn't a good fit for Rutherford County. The county executive and I at the time advised the commissioners of that fact, and we chose not to go that route. The commission chose not to go that route, and I think that was good, solid advice. We know that that development hadn't worked out very well for the counties in which they located. One thing I didn't mention in the email was that during my tenure, I also had the opportunity to work with the IDB and Nissan on an extension of their in lieu agreement, because the Industrial Development Board is involved in more than just recruiting and locating new development, new industrial tenants to come to our county. They're also involved in some pretty high finance measures that impact all the citizens in Rutherford County. So I think that I'm well suited for that role, and I'd like to continue and work in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Long?
I do. I got two questions, and this goes for everybody. What type of paying jobs are you wanting to bring here? Low, medium, high?
I don't think we need to shoot for low-paying jobs. I think we've got plenty of those, but we need to follow the guidelines that were established by Destination Rutherford and still being pursued by Destination Rutherford, and that is to entice development that's going to help raise the standard of living in Rutherford County. Our household income is not at the level at which our county leaders have always sought to have them, so we need to have better paying jobs, obviously.
And my second question is, does every company that you're trying to recruit, do they all should be able to get abatement?
No, definitely not. I mean, you've got to analyze and evaluate each proposal and make sure it's a good fit for the citizens of this county and that it does bring the type of growth that we're looking for in Rutherford County, and then decide what is an appropriate level of tax abatement or tax incentives to get them to locate here. And that was the problem with the Dell deal, quite frankly. They wanted way more than the value that they were going to bring to Rutherford County.
Any other questions for Mr. Long? Commissioner Reed, you're recognized.
We have, of course, been working with development for a long time. As Rutherford County continues to grow, are there specific areas that you can think within the county that we need to place development?
Well, you know, there was a discussion at the last meeting about where can we find the property that we need. I do know that there is property available out off the Buchanan Road exit that the property owner out there owns a fairly good-sized tract, has been holding for industrial development for a good while, and I think, quite frankly, he's about to give up and convert that to residential development. You know, you've got to search the county in their places. We have helped Eagleville create a sanitary sewer system, a decentralized sewage treatment facility that may enable them. It has the expansion capability so that they might be able to entice some industrial or commercial development in their area. And certainly, you know, with 840, they are poised where they could see some growth in that area if they had the jobs available. So just got to look around the county. There's got to be pockets somewhere.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Long. Next applicant is Mr. Justin Burris.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Justin Burris. I'm a lifelong resident of Rutherford County. And like I said last time we were together, I just want to use my experience that I've gained in business development and finance to help promote and assist in the planned development of our industrial community. My qualifications include a master's level degree as well as a 10-year career in commercial finance and business development. In addition, I have a decade of experience recruiting businesses and developing needs-based solutions and incentives for corporations and industry. I easily work with decision makers and leaders of companies. Very comfortable doing that. My desire to serve on the IDB stems from growing up here in Murfreesboro and seeing how growth can benefit my family, my friends, and my community, as long as it's done in a good and thoughtful manner. I feel like as the business community succeeds, so does the community if done correctly. Obviously, we're located on this thoroughfare right here on I-24. It's ideally suited for everything from manufacturing and distribution to white-collar corporate headquarters and office operations, big and small. If appointed to the board, I'll work cheerfully and efficiently with other members of the board and industry leaders, and I thank you for your consideration. And I know you've got a couple questions that you had asked. It's obviously, yes. I mean, we want higher paying jobs. I think white collar jobs, upper 70s, $80,000. I mean, I think that's to start. That's kind of the type of job that we want to bring in. And then what was your second question that you had asked?
Does every company that you recruit deserve abatement?
Deserve an abatement? No. I think you have to look at them on an individual basis, and I think it's going to be the common answer: see what they bring to the table and see what they offer, and it's kind of a give and take situation. So the short answer to those, no. And as far as specific spots of land, I think it's going to really kind of depend on matching up, what type of company or an industry is looking at coming in versus, where they're going. It's got to make sense. I mean, on one hand, you don't want to bring, a certain company that might not be a good fit for a certain area. You're going to have the residents up in arms, not wanting that. A lot of bad publicity from that. So it's got to make sense in that regard. So I think it's just, the job has to match the location, and that's my thoughts on that.
Any other questions? Commissioner Reed?
Rutherford County basically sits here with a bullseye on it. I mean, we have, you can come from I-40 in either direction with 840, and they cross right over I-24. So we've got people coming from all direction within this county. So we sit here what I call a bullseye. We're 500 miles from major parts of the United States. How can the industrial board go out and seek these people that wants to come to this county?
Well, I think we do have the benefit of being close to Nashville. A lot of people, you travel outside of the our area, and people say, "Where are you from?" Well, I'm from Murfreesboro. Oh, that's right, Nashville, right beside Nashville. So I think that generates just a little bit of interest just from our general location to where we are in Nashville. I think also contacts. That's kind of a big thing for me. Is just relationships and contacts. If you have connections somewhere, utilizing those contacts to maybe make a connection with, a particular industry that you want to get into. I find that, typically there's 3 degrees of separation from everybody. So I think using your existing folks to try and get your foot in the door with other companies that you want to recruit and court to come down here.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next applicant is Joey P.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the steering committee, for the opportunity to come before you tonight and for your consideration for appointment to this position. Like Mr. Long, Mr. Burris, I too was here in January for the previous vacancy, and I'm back to again stress the qualifications I have. I am a lifelong resident of Rutherford County, graduate of Oakland High School and MTSU. I'm an accountant by training. When I'm not farming, I'm spending my time at Murfreesboro Medical Clinic as its CEO. I've been in that role for, 16 years after almost a 21-year career at Murfreesboro Medical Clinic. Prior to that, I spent 10 years with one of the largest public accounting firms in the world in downtown Nashville. I do have the ability to, as a rural resident, I live in the Readable community, to see some of the open land that previously was growing corn and cotton and soybeans and wheat, and now it's growing houses, buildings, and seeing all the development that's occurred. And then thinking about why I would want to serve in this role and the tools that I would bring to this role, and thinking about the success that MMC has had from its growth and looking at places. I think as Commissioner Reed was asking about where it makes sense. There's studies, there's different things, also the infrastructure that is needed. Do we have the sewer? Do we have the electricity? Do we have the transportation infrastructure? And then thinking about even back to the Nissan recruitment years ago, that money was given for road construction and things, remembering what that little two-lane road where Nissan is located, where it used to be back before 1980. And then the analytical skills that I spent, that I honed in working and evaluating some of the largest companies in the world, as well as small, medium-sized companies in various different industries, to be able to bring that to bear on the IDB, to be able to evaluate proposed deals, to be able to evaluate proposed companies, to make sure we're being good stewards of the tax money that is with which we're entrusted when we're looking to abate taxes. I'll be glad to respond to any questions you have.
Commissioner Harris, did you want to ask your questions to him?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Do you need me to repeat them?
No, I've got them written down. I'm sorry about that. Definitely the higher levels of pay, something north of $75,000. I think as we look at the scrutiny that the Amazon deal got up in New York, any deals that our IDB does to pursue companies, it's going to have to be things that make sense for our community. And I think Mr. Long was mentioning his kids. I have two that have already graduated from college, and a third that's in his second year, a fourth one that is about to go off to college in the next 18 months, and I want them to have the opportunity that I had. When I graduated from MTSU, I had to leave the community to take a job suitable to my training as a CPA with one of the larger accounting firms. I was one of the lucky folks that had the opportunity to come back to, again, a higher paying job with a local company that was headquartered here in Murfreesboro. So definitely recruiting higher levels of pay north of $75,000 on average. And then as far as do all companies coming before the IDB deserve abatement? Definitely not. I think you've got to evaluate each deal on its merits, and not just seeing what the deal is going to cost us, but I would also say being able to evaluate the financial health of the company that is applying or potentially receiving these abatements, to make sure they're going to be able to deliver on what they're promising. If they're going to say they're going to bring 500 jobs at X dollars, do they have a track record of paying that? Do they have the financial health to continue to do that? Do they have the financial health to build whatever it is that they're trying to build? You think of an old stalwart company, GE, with the financial troubles that they've had. You know, it may not be somebody we'd want to look at, but you hear GE and you think, gosh, that's a great company. It was here in Murfreesboro for a long, long time. So I think you've got to look at each deal and make sure it makes sense for both our community and whether or not they'll be able to fulfill their obligations.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. P.
Thank you.
Next applicant is Mr. Larry Sims.
Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity again to speak to you. Wanted to emphasize I'm not from here. I'm from Chattanooga. I grew up on Signal Mountain. I went to high school at Hickson, and I was very fortunate. I was excelled in athletics, so after graduation, I ended up at Tennessee Tech. And fortunately, I didn't realize football players had to go to class, so a few months after that, I was in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne. They jerked me out, and so I served with the 101st, and I came back and served for the 82nd. When I decided to get more serious about studying, I came back, enrolled at Middle Tennessee. I started a job at La Beauce Chateau Apartments, working for Caroline and Bill Waite. And my first job over there was cleaning the hallways and then doing a little bit of maintenance stuff. So I've been at the bottom, worked my way up, and just emphasize this year as far as property taxes, city and county taxes, I've paid over $80,000. The only reason I share that, I'm not bragging about it, but just wanted to show you where I started and where I'm at today. And unfortunately, that makes me, I got to work every day because those bills come due. When you sleep, they're still coming due. And most of you know that. I was fortunate enough to graduate in '72 in the business administration and excelled in that. I never will forget when I had Dr. Haskew, who was taught economics. I can remember, fortunately, I had several classes when she was an excellent teacher. The thing I remember about Dr. Haskew, she was at the convention. I think she must have been a Democrat, but she was on television, and she was a delegate. And so anyway, I can remember that so clearly. And I thought, well, they're having a lot of fun. And Paul Johnson came to me, and I walked into the Republican Party the last couple of years ago, and he says, you can be a delegate. I said, what? I said, he said, all you have to do is fill this form out, and you get 25 people, and you better get 50 because some of them won't be right. You can be a delegate. And I went over and I said, asked somebody at the higher end, I said, what's a delegate? She had to Google it and find out what it was. She read it to me, and when she got through, I still didn't know anymore. Anyway, I filled the form out, and I'm just kind of giving you a little background how I come about things. Am I over my 2 minutes?
Our 2 minutes are up, Mr. Sims. So maybe you can give some of your answers in the questions.
Oh, yeah, okay.
that
Well,
are
it's
asked for
an
you.
interesting story. You got time, we'll go to Puckett's. I'll
Okay.
buy you dinner.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sims from the committee? Commissioner Harris, did you want to ask your two questions to him again?
As far as abatement, you know, I'm not a big fan of that. The Nissan, I mean, the deal they did with Amazon, I wasn't necessarily for it. I saw the salaries they're going to pay people. But, you know, sometimes you got to be a team player, and I said to myself, well, I wouldn't have really voted for it. But if everybody else is going to feel comfortable with it and like it, I would go and do it, even though I didn't like it. And I think that's some of the attitudes you have to make something work, because you're going to be doing some things you don't necessarily like to do, but you're going to be playing. Now, the biggest problem we always have, and I tell people all the time, you got to get the whole story. We just get nits and pieces of what. That's the bad thing about news. They just tell you what you want to hear. But until you hear the whole story, you really don't know what you're going to do and not do. So I'm a believer in digging into it and find out what the bottom line is. But I'd say in most cases, my personal opinion, I'm a small business person. I like small business. I work with small business. The people I've seen, they need highly qualified people. So you're going to have to come up with some programs of training people at wherever, MTSU, trade schools, and get these levels of quality people coming in, because they're all high-tech people. And I think that's the direction we need to go. And I think that we're headed in that direction, so I have no problem with it. Fortunately, I think a lot of times things take care of themselves. It's just a matter of getting in the mode and have that goal, and you can go with it.
I got a question. Are you aware of the Wolverine Project?
Which one?
Wolverine Project, where they're bringing 800 jobs here?
I haven't heard about that yet.
Okay. The IDB approved it for abatement, and they were bringing 800 jobs here.
Yeah.
But those jobs, the majority of those jobs, wouldn't he be able to afford an apartment or a house here?
Yeah.
So one of my things is I want to make sure that we're not bringing in, even though it's a lot of jobs, lower income jobs. I want to be able to see the IDB have jobs that can benefit this county, be able to afford houses, be able to afford apartments, and not to start. So do you agree with that, or do you feel
Well-
jobs are more important?
I'm just giving you an example. I started out as a maintenance guy, cleaning hallways. And I took that and made it work and found out I could do other things. So there is important of getting somebody to do something and getting to a level. Now, a lot of that was the drive I had myself. But then we need to come up with a situation where we take those people, and some of these people are probably going to have some kind of subsidies and rents. The government's constantly putting apartments out where they only have to pay so much a percentage. So I think that's one of those things you're still going to have to get in, and the program will probably work, but what's going to really work, you got to take those people and educate them to a higher level. And my personal opinion, I've got 7 destinations. I've been to all kind of schools. I've been to all kind of seminars. I've been to national conventions. I've been, you name it, I've been it. I even went to the shopping center convention in Las Vegas every year. So there's 37,000 realtors out there. That's a lot of realtors. I went to one of my clients and I said, give me $10,000 a year and I'm going to go there and try to help you sell your property. Well, when I got through, he let me have $85,000. Now, I could have never gone, I could have never done it unless that owner let me have that money. So you got to get kind of creative. Fortunate enough, I'm selling this property for $7.3 million. That was a pretty good investment. And then the rest of his property, you're going to get another $5 million. He's got about $3 million in it. So you look at the turn. So that's some of the things you can do about being creative to get the job done. But there's nothing wrong with asking people to help you do something, especially if they need people to train, to go at. So most of the things, you can go out there, there's about 3,000 or 4,000 vendors out there. You can spend 4 or 5 days and you can do more there, and you can 2 or 3 years scattering around trying to run. So you got to go see what's available in the industrial end of it. They all do seminars, everybody. So you got to go, send the people, get them there, and push Murfreesboro and see where it's going to take you. It's kind of like open the door. You got to open the door, and then you got to work it as you open it. Now, it took me 4 or 5 years to finally get somebody. Even though I worked it every year, it didn't work 1 year, and it's not going to work 1 year. So you got to build your network of people and things, talking about Murfreesboro. But Murfreesboro is an easy sell. The biggest thing that's pushing Murfreesboro are medical end of it. People want to come to Murfreesboro because all the medical people we've got here and the hospitals. We're probably going to get another hospital here pretty soon, I think, on Veterans Boulevard. And so those are the kinds of things you got to get out. And so we got all kind of potential and growth and going in other directions that can bring a lot of big money in here.
Any other questions for Mr. Sims? Thank you, Mr. Sims.
I wanted to say one thing. I appreciate y'all letting me stand up, but unfortunately, every time somebody gets up here and I hear them, I say, well, I think I'll vote for him.
It's a difficult situation to be in, I can assure you.
It's hard to think of somebody's going to vote for me, but thank you very much.
Our next applicant is Mr. Marty Leonard.
Chairman, committee members, thank you for letting me come back. Just a quick overview. I spent 35 years in the same industry all over the country. I've moved a number of times. I started out here in Murfreesboro. My parents started first grade over at Bellwood, so I've been here a long time. We moved away for 30 years. I got my first opportunity 20 years to come back to Tennessee, to Murfreesboro, and I took that opportunity very quickly to come back and start a new business. I have come into this Middle Tennessee area, started a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. So I've worked with all the companies in the area. I've also worked with Small Business Administration, TVA, the state, and the county and the city of Bedford County and Shelbyville to bring a business back into this area. So I've done that before. I've negotiated abatements with different entities. I've also been on part of the Goodyear and Huntsman Packaging expansion and acquisition team across the country, and I've gone across the country and evaluated places to move companies to. On a daily basis, I'm sales director for our company, and on a daily basis, I'm out calling on companies, manufacturing and distribution companies across the United States. That's what I do every day. I have a team of individuals that work for me who are calling on these companies also. And I go to these new companies all over the country, and I'll see where they're starting these new businesses. And my first thought is always, why didn't they do that in Rutherford County? And I think that having the expertise to be able to go out and talk to these companies about moving here and all the benefits of that, I think that that's a key to this position on the Industrial Development Board. So I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you.
Any questions for Mr. Leonard?
It's the same ones I've asked everyone.
Okay. As far as jobs go, I think as far as pay goes, yes, I think there is a certain level of average pay you want out of there, but it really depends on what the industry is. What are those people doing, and how is it affecting, Rutherford County? If you're bringing an industry in here that's using a ton of natural resources, of course you're going to want it to be higher. I think that if you're, for pay as on an individual basis, I think your average pay, yes, you want up around $80,000, $90,000 a year for average. I think that, you can't say a company, I want everybody in the whole building to be paid more than $80,000 a year, because there's going to be times where it's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to pay some people that much money in a company. I'd love to see that happen, but this doesn't happen that way. I'm hiring people all over the country every day, and some areas of the country, yes, we might be able to get that much, and some areas of the country you might not. But for moving here, I think that it depends on the skill set, and it depends on what those people are actually doing. And what was your second question?
Does every company deserve abatement?
No. And there's a lot of talk about abatements, and I think that a lot of you hear about the Amazon deal. But when you break the Amazon deal down to really what it was in New York, it was $500 per employee over a 7-year period. So you really think about everybody pitching this big fit over how many billions of dollars it's going to cost them. But when they broke the deal down on abatements, it was $500 a person for 7 years. So it's less than $100 a year that it was going to end up costing them to bring 50,000 high-paying jobs to the area. So I think that, no, it's not a matter of giving abatements to everybody. You definitely wouldn't want to do that. But I think you've got to break it down. You say, okay, if Rutherford County is willing to do this kind of abatement for you, what's the state willing to do? What's TVA willing to do to bring industry in? When I came here, TVA gave me a great abatement to bring a business to Middle Tennessee because of the amount of electricity it used. So I think it's a matter of exactly what kind of industry it is and how much is it really costing the people of Rutherford County for each job. And you have to break it down to each job. Because you can look at it real quick. If they're only bringing in, it might bring in 1,000 jobs, but if it's going to cost you so much per person, it's not worth it. Maybe I can bring in a couple of companies to do the same thing, and it costs us a lot less. So it's the art of the deal on each particular one.
Well, one of the things that I'm concerned with is, and I keep going back to this, so I apologize, but when the Wolverine project came in, and we gave a huge abatement, and there was 800 jobs, but 100 of them was 100,000, 100 of them was 80,000, and then the rest of them were anywhere between $11 to $15. And what I am as a commissioner is the school board, and the school board will tell you this as well, it costs almost $8,000 per student per year. I mean, that's a lot of money in investment, and then I see where they can't afford housing or where, that's the kind of thing that I'm worried about.
I do too. And personally, I don't know enough about that deal down to every individual detail to give a proper opinion on it. But if I would have to say if the majority of the jobs were in that lower end, under $50,000 a year, I would not have been for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Our next applicant is Lance Lee.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Lance Lee. I'm a lifelong resident of Rutherford County. Presently, I am the Highway Division Manager for a company called Polyguard. Basically, we're a station manufacturer out of Ennis, Texas. Basically, what I do there is I run the whole United States. I deal with departments of transportation all over the United States, along with basically doing bridge work and airport work. Before that, I was the technical director for the architectural division at that company. If you'll, obviously you've got all the application in front of you. I've got over 25 years of public service in Rutherford County. I've also got over 20 years of business management in the construction industry. As far as my public service is concerned, I'm very fortunate. I've been able to work with the City of Laverne, the Town of Smyrna, the City of Murfreesboro, and also the Rutherford County Commissioners in different capacities on different boards for the last 25 years, all the way from Planning Commission to the Smyrna Charity Assistance Board. Presently, at this time, I am the chair on the Limeball Limeberry Foundation. I'm also on the Board of Trustees for Motlow College, and I'm also on a local planning commission. As far to answer your questions, Commissioner, based on those low-paying jobs, I would have voted against that proposal based on the paying jobs. I think one thing that we're overlooking is we keep talking about, I don't think it's about the number of jobs it's bringing in. Obviously, we need to look at the company, see if they're going to be a good business partner to the community. We've got to look at our return on our investment, and that means a lot of things. Primarily, we are creating a great deal of workforce in this county. When you look at the relationship between Motlow and MTSU and how they're transferring, all the way from our high schools and the vocational schools that we're going to now, we're trying to get back into those type applications. We need to make sure that the businesses that are coming into this community actually are going to be using the workforce that we're developing today. And I think something maybe we're overlooking that with some of the questions that you've been bringing up. I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Any other questions for Mr. Lee?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Reed?
how would you go about seeking out that workforce?
Well, I think, Commissioner, right now, you've got to mold the workforce that we're developing and streamline it with the businesses coming in. So obviously, we're already doing some of that right now with the Technology Center basically across from Nissan. We're joining businesses and manufacturing and joining those two. Obviously, we want to be able to put to work the young people that we're actually training. The city, municipalities, and the county commissioners, as you, are investing money in these organizations. And it goes all the way back to the library, too, just as far as creating a place for somebody to get an application to apply for a job. We have to make sure we're streamlining the two together, and obviously that takes, depending on whether you're talking with the City of Laverne, Town of Smyrna, City of Murfreesboro, or the county, they've got to work together and make sure we streamline that workforce and make sure the money we're investing in our young people are actually going into the positions coming in.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you for your time.
Now, our final applicant is Ms. Candy Joyce.
Thank you, Commissioners, for having me. I apologize for my voice. This is all I got. So, most of the information that I gave to you all at the last application for the open seat still stands, having worked with the Chamber of Commerce, starting Leadership Rutherford, and just last Friday celebrating 25 years at the Realtor Association here in Rutherford County. We serve 8 counties, so I have a bigger perspective of what's going on not only in Rutherford County, but what happens in the growth areas around us. And that's a perspective, I think, when we're looking at these businesses coming, that we need to know what else is available outside our area so that we have a better recruiting tool than the others do. In reference to your question, Commissioner, you were talking about jobs and the paying. You can't have too many jobs, but you also have to have qualified people to take those jobs. We have low unemployment in Rutherford County already, so we need to start looking at jobs that we can get new people in here that can give us jobs in the 50 and up range, and I say 50 only because that will allow them to have a livable wage until they grow into a new job or a new career. No, we would not want to make sure anybody that came here and asked for funds got the funds unless they had a very clear return on investment to Rutherford County, to our taxpayers who are giving these dollars, because we want the jobs, we want the opportunities that they're going to bring, but also if they're going to be a good partner in our county for the growth and expansion of their business as our county grows and expands. I know our services are going to be limited by massive big community businesses coming in, so we have to be mindful of matching what our growth opportunities can provide before we start matching them with dollars we could be giving to others. I'd be happy to answer any other questions as long as the voice holds out.
Any other questions for Ms. Joyce? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, members, we've just heard from 7 great applicants, and we have a plan that we've adopted on how to move forward. So we're going to each choose 3 people to move to the next round, and then those 3 will be pared down over a few more votes possibly. So are we ready to vote?
We are, and Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, if there's a tie on number 3, then we need to have I would suggest we have a kind of a vote off on that.
Oh, correct. So if there was a tie for third place, we'd
Right.
have to vote to break the tie like we did last time.
Correct,
So,
okay.
any other comments? Okay, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Harris,
P. Long and Burris.
Burris. Yes. Commissioner Cush,
Joyce, Sims, and P.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Long, P, and Sims.
Commissioner Reed,
Long, P, and Sims.
Commissioner Rather,
Joyce, Long, and Sims.
Commissioner Stevens,
Sims, Joyce, and Lee.
okay, I have Sims with 5, P and Long with 4, Joyce with 3, and Lee with 1, and Burris with 1.
So Sims, P, and Long will make it to the next round. And so we're going to each choose one of these until someone receives a majority. So if nobody receives 4 votes on this round, then the lowest vote getter would be knocked out, and we would vote on the remaining 2. So is everybody clear on that?
So we're voting just for one?
Voting just for one on this round.
All right. Would you repeat the 3 then that we're voting on?
Long, Sims, and P.
Call the roll.
Can you give us just a second to
Okay, sure.
to digest that? Long, Sims, and P.
Everybody ready? Okay, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Harris,
P.
Commissioner Cush,
Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Sims.
Commissioner Reed,
Long,
Commissioner Rather,
Long.
Commissioner Stevens,
Sims.
3 for Sims, 2 for Long, and 1 for P.
So Long and Sims will make it to our next round. And so we will each choose one of those. Is that correct? Is that what you have?
I will read my motion. Can I do that?
Yes.
I will read my full motion. This is just, by the way, this is the exact same motion we used last time on the last selection for IDB. The committee would vote then to break the tie if necessary if there was a third place tie. Committee members would then be able to ask questions to the selected 3 applicants, and then each member of the committee would choose one of the 3 to be recommended full commission. If one applicant does not receive a majority of the votes, third place applicant should be dropped out of the round, and the committee would select one of the remaining 2. All right, so let's think about that. let's start from the top. Each member of the committee would then select 3 applicants to vote to the next round with the highest vote totals moving forward. In the event of a tie for 3rd place, the committee would then vote to break the tie if necessary. Committee members would then be able to ask questions, which we chose not to do, to the selected 3 applicants, and then each member of the committee would choose one of the 3 to be recommended to the full commission. If one applicant does not receive a majority of the votes, the 3rd place applicant would be dropped out of the round, and the committee would select one of the remaining 2. So how do you interpret that?
But we have 2 people, neither of which has received a majority.
Majority,
We have to
right.
get 4 votes
So
to advance.
we need to have a runoff then of those top 2.
We have to break the tie, or we have to break the gridlock here between Mr. Long and Mr. Sims.
So we have a simple majority of one of those 2.
Correct.
That's how I would read that motion, or interpret that motion. So now we are voting on Mr. Long and Mr. Sims, is that correct?
That is correct. You've got to choose between Long or Sims. Is everybody clear on that and ready to move forward? Okay, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Harris,
Long.
Commissioner Cush,
Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Sims.
Commissioner Reed,
Long.
Commissioner Rather,
Long.
Commissioner Stevens.
Sims. Well,
We could entertain questions if we wanted to.
so do you want to make a motion that each of the applicants be given 2 more minutes to make their case and answer questions from the committee members?
I would make that motion if we would want to bring them up for 2 more minutes of questions.
So they get 2 minutes to speak and then questions, or they get 2 minutes with questions included?
Let's just do 2 minutes total.
They get 2 minutes total. There's a motion by Commissioner Cush. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Reed. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, Mr. Long, come on up here, and you've got 2 minutes.
So I'm just going to yield my time to you commissioners. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to respond to them. I think we've said about all we need to say at this point, and just let y'all ask whatever you need to ask of me now. Unless I sit here in silence, and then I'll continue talking, whichever you want to do.
Well, I have a question. How can our Industrial Development Board build relationships with our technical colleges and community colleges in the area?
Certainly, I think we need to be involved in that effort, and I hope we can do everything we can. We got a governor now that seems to have a focus on that more so than we've had in the past. He appreciates the value of an industrial and technology training program, so our Industrial Development Board has resources available, and they should be able to invest those resources in that effort. I'm sure there probably is plenty of support on the Industrial Board now to do that, and I would certainly support that myself. The only other thing that I'll say, I guess, since there's not a lot of questions, is, I don't have any personal interest in this county. I've been a public servant my entire career, so I've not been involved in any kind of development or real estate programs throughout the county, so I don't have a dog in the hunt other than just trying to make life better for my kids and my grandkids. That's the only reason I'm up here tonight.
I have a question for Mr. Long. You are, there's a lot of paperwork to shuffle here, so if I'm mistaken in this question, forgive me. You are about to retire from CUD, is that correct?
That's correct.
I assume CUD is involved nearly on every IDB discussion or negotiation?
Pretty much. Obviously one of the first things that a prospect has to know is, do we have water available?
Right.
And what it's going to cost and those kind of things.
Okay. Are there other utilities that are involved?
Certainly, all electric utilities are going to be involved. Somebody mentioned locations for industrial tenants, and sewer is a big prospect as well, a big issue. So you got to look to see whether sewer can be made available or whether we could develop a step system to serve that particular industry. So,
All right.
yeah, all
So
of them are
that's the end of the 2 minutes,
Okay, thank
Commissioner.
broadband, everything's on the table.
Mr. Sims, you want to come forward and give your 2 minutes?
Thank you again. This is a little nerve-wracking. I'm not used to it. 2 years ago, Bill Lee came to my office, the governor. And Bill came to see me, not for me. He came to see me for who I knew and what I could do for him. And I'll never forget, we spent about 15, 20 minutes together, and I don't remember who brought him. But when that gentleman left my office, I said, he's going to be the new governor of Tennessee. I really felt like it. One of the things that I think is important, taking advantage of those relationships, I will be on his doorstep immediately, because you got to work these kind of things from the top down. And those kind of relationships you just can't get unless you're out there knocking the doors down. So, and I wanted to share that with you. That's very important to know. Do you have any question? Yes, Mr. Petty.
Mr. Sims, I think the questions that I've asked related to this, it is my concern of where do we put a lot of this development? And I think you have some plans on that. I'd like to hear those plans.
I've been fortunate. I've also been a member of the local chamber, but I've also been a member of the Nashville Chamber. The chamber spoke to us a couple of years ago, and he says when people come to Davidson County, they mean Rutherford as well, even though they might not say it. He also told me, I've told you a little bit before, he said when they come in, the people want to be down to 840. They don't want to go beyond that. Now, that was a couple of years ago, and things do change, and I understand that. So it tells me the emphasis needs to be on 840. As I know 840, if you're going towards Blackman, you're not going to get any industrial development out there because they don't want it. They don't want to see it. Wilson County is all for it. We got a good area. That area's got a lot of rock, got a lot of cedars, so it's a perfect area to develop into industrial park. We need an industrial park. I don't care what people say. And don't let it come to you. You got to go get it and go out there and get it. So if you'll do those things, people will come to you. And that's very, very important. I understand that. I know how to talk to people. Just because the land's out there, the Ossett family decided to sell the other day, and they sold their property. But for years, they didn't want to sell. Because the land's out there doesn't mean you're going to get it. So it's important to get those relationships and get that on the drawing board.
All right, and that's the conclusion of Mr. Sims' 2 minutes. So, committee, is there any discussion or, thank you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any discussion, recommendations on moving forward from this point?
Mr. Chairman, this is basically a question, if this is possible. Do we have to pick that one person tonight, or is it possible for us to take these two onto the full commission and let the commission make a decision?
The chair would certainly entertain a motion to that effect if you would like to make it.
I'd like to make that motion, that we approve both of these and send them to the commission.
Is there a second? A motion dies for lack of a second. Is there any other motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we vote on these two, and if we're deadlocked again, we move it to the full commission.
So if one does not get a majority, we would send both of them?
Yes.
Okay. Have a motion by Commissioner Harris. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Cush. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Madam Secretary, let's call the roll again.
Commissioner Harris.
Long.
Commissioner Cush.
Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo.
Sims.
Commissioner Reed.
Sims.
Commissioner Rather.
Long.
Commissioner Stevens.
Sims.
2.
So Mr. Sims received 4 votes, and Mr. Long received 2. So, Mr. Sims, your name will be recommended by our steering committee at next week's county commission meeting on Thursday night. I would recommend that you be there in case there's any questions for you there. And thanks again to all of our applicants. We've had, it's a good problem to have a lot of good applicants, and it's very difficult for us to have to choose one of those, but we do appreciate everybody applying. Okay, members, our next item is to announce a commissioner vacancy on the Agriculture Advisory Board. That's to fill the unexpired term of Commissioner Steve Piercy, and that expires in December 2019. Item number 5 is to request to add school board member to the Insurance Committee. Ms. Moore, if you want to be making your way up. And members, you probably remember from last month that she approached us about possibly adding a school board member to the Insurance Committee. We sent her back to the school board to discuss some ideas, and hopefully she did that and has a report for us tonight. Ms. Moore, you're recognized.
Have to bring it down where I can get to it. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you so much for having me back again this evening. I know it's been a long evening. You got a big agenda, so I will be as succinct as possible. Yes, I did go back. We did discuss it as a board. Of course, as you know, what I presented at your steering committee last month was that we have another seat on that actual committee, the Insurance and Risk Management and Insurance Committee, because of the size of the school system and the fact that we as a board obviously represent over 75% of the employees that participate in the benefits. Certainly understand and respect, though, the concerns that you had about the committee already being so large. We still feel like we obviously would like to have a more active role, and I think this is something that really probably has never been presented to you from the school board before, that perhaps there was just kind of the content with the 2 seats. However, that being said, what I'd like to propose to you this evening, since, you know, out of respect for your concerns, we still as a board would like to have participation and be involved. Mr. Young and myself actually are both willing to step up and serve in that capacity. It would be primarily me, and just to share with you one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this, for those of you that don't know me, I spent over 30 years in a fairly high-level risk management and human resources role. So I have shopped benefit plans and programs and worked with brokers and so on for a large part of my career. So I feel like I have a unique perspective to bring to that committee, both from the perspective of being a school board member as well as having that professional background. So what we'd like to ask at this point is that you would allow us to have a non-voting seat, if you will. So in other words, that we have a seat at the table to where we can participate as the other committee members do, you know, participate in the conversations and the questions, but that this role also would be allowed to serve as a proxy vote if one of our other 2 committee members are not able to be there, so that we would at least still have, of course, those 2 representative votes, if that makes sense. So that would be our request for the steering committee this evening.
All right, members, you've heard her request. I'll remind you from the resolution that created the Risk Management Committee that there are numerous appointees to this board. We've got 5 employees of Rutherford County, including 2 employees from the Board of Education to be selected by the school superintendent. So if you recommend moving forward with her proposal, you also might want to include in your motion how that person would be selected. And since the other 2 are selected by the school superintendent, that might be a good way to do this one too, if the committee decides to move forward with her request.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think probably in this particular case, because what we determined was that it would be a board appointment. In other words, our board chairman, who now, of course, is Mr. Jim Estes, would appoint this role, the person to serve in this role, much like we do with our other committee representations from the board.
So to be selected by the chairman of the
school board chairman, correct.
Is there a motion?
So you're a member, but you don't have voting. Unless one of the members don't show up, then you take their voting.
Exactly.
Okay.
But still have the opportunity to participate in the exchanges that go on during those meetings.
Okay.
Give input.
Is there a motion, Commissioner Rather?
Well, I want to make sure I heard this correctly. There are already 2 on that committee from the school board? Is that what?
They have 2 employees of the Board of Education, And if I'm not mistaken, that's Mr. Sandvig and then Dr. Anthony, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So you've got the representatives from our Human Resource as well as our Finance Department, which I know it came up at the last meeting. It was suggested that maybe we might want to replace one of them, which is really not my wish because, again, I think when you look at the fact that the school system, again, represents such a large part of the employees of this county, I think the two people in those roles, our HR person and our finance person, still are very critical to that committee. But I also think that having a school board representative there to kind of help balance out and be a part of and involved in that is very important.
Commissioner Cush?
So that would give a total of how many members or how many members are on there now on that committee?
Well, there would still be just 2 voting members from the school system, from the Rutherford County Schools, but this third position would really just be a participatory committee member with no voting rights.
Commissioner Cush, here's the answer to your question.
Okay.
So this committee is made up of the county mayor, 3 county commissioners appointed by the steering committee, 1 Rutherford Education Association representative appointed by the REA, 4 members at large to be appointed by the county mayor for 2-year terms, 5 employees of Rutherford County, and that's 2 employees from the Board of Education to be selected by the school superintendent, 1 employee from the sheriff's department to be selected by the sheriff, 1 employee from the highway department to be selected by the highway superintendent, and 2 employees from county general to be selected from by the benefits and insurance committee from applications forwarded with recommendation of their department head. And then in addition to those, the finance director, human resources director, and the insurance director are non-voting members on the committee. So I believe that's
21 or something
14 voting members and 3 non-voting members. So you've got 17 people on the committee currently, if my math was correct.
All right.
I got a question.
Commissioner, you're recognized.
Mr. Query, is the proxy eligible? Like, is that eligible to do that?
Mr. McCrary, what she was saying was that if one of the board's 2 employees is absent, that the school board member would be able to vote for them. It's kind of like an alternate to the Board of Zoning Appeals or Codes Enforcement or something to that effect. None by this resolution that created it. Mm-mm. Will you use the microphone for us?
John?
You are.
So, in my mind, what you're creating is an alternate position. The whole idea that you have committee members, which it sounds like there may already be some, that don't vote but can participate is sort of inherently raises a red flag for me personally. I'm not saying you can't do it legally. Perhaps you can, but that is confusing to me because you have a body that you're appointing whose job it is to debate and determine various issues. And by injecting people who are not actually members of the voting body, you're allowing them to influence the outcome of the vote. So I'm not sure if it's, I'm not very comfortable with the idea that you have one of those people who would normally not vote, but then if somebody happens to be absent, steps in and votes. To me, you're creating a very complex labyrinth of voting options there at that committee. You've already got a huge committee there. My 2 cents.
Commissioner Rather.
So right now, there are 2 Rutherford County Central Office kind of employees that are on that board, plus an REA member.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm getting at, if you've got those 3 people on that board, what do you think the value of one other person on that board would be?
Well, and again, I think there's a lot of value to be had out of having someone that actually serves on the school board that is looking out for and has the best interest of all of those school system employees at heart and can look at it from a different perspective than someone perhaps that's just in the HR or in the finance role. And again, when you have the expertise that we do to bring to the table and you couple that with the fact that, again, we do make those decisions on behalf of a lot of employees of this county, I think that, personally, I think it has a lot of value to bring forward.
Is there a motion, or is there any more discussion? Okay. Well, I guess no action will be taken on that agenda item. Okay, our next item is number 6. This is the discussion of a school board's voucher resolution, and Ms. Moore, you're recognized again.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, of course, I spoke to you also last month about this, and I'm here tonight to present you with what is a unanimous joint resolution that's been put together by both the Rutherford County Board of Education and the Murfreesboro City School Board in opposition to school vouchers and education savings accounts. So with your permission, I'll read through this just very quickly, and my wish tonight would be that the steering committee allows us to move this forward to present to the full commission. We feel like it's obviously in the financial best interest of everyone in this county that we make sure that we protect the dollars that we already have for our public school system. So I'll go ahead and begin then. Whereas the legislature for the state of Tennessee has resumed session and a number of paid lobbyists and private for-profit companies are seeking to have the state of Tennessee adopt a voucher program by which public school funds are diverted to private companies and private interests. And whereas many of these lobbyists and private companies and organizations are out-of-state companies and organizations that are spending significant sums of money to advance their agenda through a voucher program, and whereas the public education system of Tennessee is best managed by Tennesseans for which it serves and not by out-of-state companies and organizations. And whereas the Rutherford County and City of Murfreesboro school systems have been recognized as exemplary school systems in the state of Tennessee, and whereas the Rutherford County school system is the 4th largest school system in the state of Tennessee, and together with the City of Murfreesboro school system, the two school systems serve in excess of 59,000 students. And whereas the Rutherford County Board of Education and the Murfreesboro City School Board recognize that voucher programs and education savings accounts hurt public education, whereas voucher programs hurt public education by taking dollars that would otherwise go into the public school system, giving those dollars to private interests. And whereas every public school system in Tennessee has cost to maintain a free public school system, and any funds taken from the public school system for private vouchers are not likely to be replaced by the state. And whereas school vouchers likely will lead to tax increases as local governments would need to increase property taxes to pay for lost revenue from the state going to private voucher programs, and whereas a loss of tax dollars will reduce funding available for academic programs and teaching staff at public schools, and whereas school vouchers send public dollars to private schools, creating a two-tier school system not open to all students, and whereas studies of voucher programs in Indiana, Louisiana, and Ohio have shown that students enrolled in private schools through vouchers perform academically worse than they performed in the public schools, and the New York Times has reported such problems. And whereas studies have shown that students attending private school through vouchers in Indiana and Ohio score lower on reading and math tests compared to similar students in the public schools, whereas voucher programs do not fix lower performing schools but undermine such schools' ability to improve and perform better. And whereas paid pro-voucher lobbyists have lobbied for vouchers for the last several years, and whereas paid pro-voucher lobbyists are now attempting to achieve their goals through rebranding their campaign through education savings accounts, and whereas education savings accounts are the equivalent of vouchers and divert funds from the public school system to the private schools and private benefit. Whereas funds diverted to the education savings accounts will result in higher taxes in order to fund the Tennessee's public school systems. Whereas diverting funds to education savings accounts results in no accountability over those funds to ensure that education dollars are actually spent on academically successful programs in schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved unanimously by all of the board members of the Rutherford County Board of Education and the Murfreesboro City School Board, the Rutherford County Board of Education and Murfreesboro City School Board oppose legislation establishing school vouchers and education savings accounts in Tennessee, as school vouchers and education savings accounts hurt the free public education system, divert limited state education dollars to private interests, and have been shown to hurt the academic progress of students and will result in a need for an increase in taxes to replace the funds going to private individuals and entities through voucher and education savings accounts.
Okay, members, is there any discussion on this matter?
Would you repeat that, please? No, I'm just, no.
Yeah, can I get a glass of water?
Mr. Chairman, if I could be recognized. Well, let's just jump into it. I am an anti-voucher guy for Rutherford County, but I'm not sure that I am qualified to speak for the whole state of Tennessee, which I think you're asking this board to do, this committee to do. So, if that's your wish for us to vote on this on behalf of the entire state, I'm not sure I can do that. I'd be happy to support and say that I would vote on this on behalf of Rutherford County, but I just don't know that I'm qualified or feel comfortable in saying that for the rest of the counties. So, do you have a
Commissioner,
response to that?
Thank you for that, and yes, I do, and I realize that perhaps it's not specifically carved out in here, and we have sent this resolution out to the entire state delegation because the concern about the draining of funds from public schools, obviously, we feel like is at the detriment of the whole state. However, we're here specifically representing your district school systems, Rutherford County and Murfreesboro City Schools. So it is on behalf of our school system, obviously, that we're defending this position. And also, consideration of the fact that it really is up to the legislators, I guess, to figure out how they're going to make that work and what it's going to look like if indeed they do move vouchers, education savings programs through, recognizing the fact that there are very successful school systems such as ours that this could truly be a detriment to. So, even though, again, it didn't expressly state that before I started, this obviously is an intent to have the county commission recognize and support your local school districts in opposition to these vouchers, not necessarily the entire state.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner McAdoo.
I got one question. Since you come to us, and I guess you're asking the Rutherford County Commission to support this, did you go to Murfreesboro City Council and ask them to support it?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a good question. We have not yet. I'm in conversation with Mr. Campbell, Butch Campbell, the chairman of the city board, about doing that, but we have not done so yet.
Oh, when do you plan on doing it?
Well, since that's the city domain, I was going to ask Mr. Campbell, of course, to make that determination, but I'll be happy to check with him and find out when we're going to be able to do that. It's a very good question. Thank you. I'm sorry I don't have the answer.
Okay.
Ms. Moore?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Harris, you're recognized.
I got some questions.
Absolutely.
And here's what rank are we in the county, Rutherford County? What's our rank in education? Are we number 2, number 1?
I'm not sure I'm understanding
the question.
Are we
the best school system in all the state of Tennessee?
Well, if you're asking Lisa Moore school board opinion, yes, we are.
Thank you. I agree with you.
Thank you.
My question to you on this is, and I agree with Commissioner Cush, but I'm just curious. Do you feel, with us being such highly ranked, that this voucher is going to hurt us at all? I don't understand why people would want to leave our school system because it's so good. So do you feel that school vouchers would hurt this county by a big exodus of a lot of students?
It's a very fair question. I think that they certainly have the potential to, yes, because the new push now is not so much for vouchers in and of themselves, but the education savings accounts, which, if structured the way these paid lobbyists are lobbying to have them done, would mean that there would be savings accounts set up for the parents, and they essentially could spend the money on different and assorted things. And if we have students leave and parents that pull those voucher dollars, because you'll be looking at the potential of that opening the door for parents to come in and say, and please don't misunderstand me, I'm the first one to be a proponent of parent choice, absolutely. Our position is that they already have that choice. The parents that want to homeschool or private school are already doing that. But these educational savings accounts would open up the door to allow those families that are already doing something different to pull those dollars away from the public education system. And then it is going to be up to our county commission and others to decide how we're going to fund that when those dollars are lost. So yes, I think it definitely has that potential, Commissioner.
So if it costs $12,000 to go to Providence, and right now your figure's what, $8,000 per student?
About $7,800, I think, right now in Rutherford County that
So
we're
how
urging.
would that work? Like, would they cut the private school a check, or would they cut that check to the parent?
Commissioner, that's a good question. That's going to depend on how the legislation shakes out. There's proponents of both. And there are, of course, I think you're going to have to ask the private schools. I think there are going to be many of them that are not even going to be willing to accept those vouchers, because when you accept that federal and state money, you're accepting the restrictions that comes along with it, whether it be the testing restrictions or the federal guidelines and restrictions. And those private schools are simply, in my opinion, and I believe our boards too, not going to be able to provide the kind of education with those kind of dollars if they have to make the concession to make do without the rest of it.
So, me and you both kind of agree, private schools ain't going to give up their power over $8,000 when they're at 12. So again, I'll ask, and I'm not trying to pick on you at all, Ms. Moore. I think you're very good at what you do. But do you feel there's going to be a major problem here?
I don't think it will be initially. But I think it has the potential to grow into that, because this is another one of those situations where you crack that door open a little bit and it'll be swinging wide open within a couple of years. Thank you, Commissioner. I hope I answered.
You had, I'm sorry, I know it's on me, and I just want to know these things, because I really feel that I'm very big parent choice.
Absolutely.
So, wouldn't the school board have the final say on vouchers?
No. That's why we're here.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Rather.
Ms. Moore, a couple things. You're just here to make us aware of this and kind of give the blessing for you to proceed on. Is that
Well,
correct?
Commissioner, fair question. Here to present, first of all, is to make the commission aware that we've taken this action and that we, as our two boards, are doing this. But we really were in hopes that we would be able to, the steering committee would agree to allow us to present this to the entire commission, in hopes that we could get the support and possibly even have the commission consider either an addendum or perhaps adopting a resolution of their own to support your school systems on the heels of this. But we wanted to go ahead and get it out, because obviously time's a wasting as far as the legislative session and the ability to get anything done. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move to, I guess, give the blessing to forward this on to the commission.
We have a motion to forward the resolution on to the full commission. Is there a second? Commissioner Reed seconds. Any discussion on this?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner McAdoo.
since we're going to forward it to the full commission, I probably would like, at the full commission, for the school board representative to let me know if this was presented, or will be presented, or never presented to the Murfreesboro City Council for their consideration. I think that's very important that we have that information during our full commission meeting.
Any other discussion on this? Commissioner Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As written, I will not support it. Like I said earlier, I don't think I'm in a position to support a document that represents the entire state of Tennessee. If it was reworded in such that it says that we were supporting our Rutherford County School District, I would agree to that. but I just don't feel comfortable with a blanket approval or a vote of support for all the counties of Tennessee.
Any other discussion? I wonder if we shouldn't try to tone this thing down a little bit. I don't want to antagonize our legislators, and I'm not sure how much they're going to pay too much attention to us when we're accusing them of being lobbied and all this by these out-of-state people. I don't want to antagonize and burn bridges.
Understand.
Would the school board be okay with us drafting a simple resolution that just says we don't believe we need vouchers or these education savings accounts here in Rutherford County?
Absolutely. I mean, and I
Leave out
feel
the
very
part-
confident that I can speak on behalf of both boards, that if you would be willing to take your support, at least to that point, it would mean a tremendous amount to both of our school systems. And Commissioner McAdoo, back to your point, I will make sure that this is taken care of as far as getting this in front of the city school system or council as well. Thank you. But yes, Commissioner, absolutely.
Is there any more discussion on this or any amendments?
Well, I mean,
Commissioner Cush, you're recognized.
Well, we've got a motion and a second, so do we need to vote on that original?
If we're ready to vote and there's no more discussion, then we can vote. So, well, let's call the roll on this one.
All right, it is to approve and forward the resolution as presented to the commission.
Correct.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Cush?
No.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed? Commissioner Rather?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
No. 4-2, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right, members, our next item is one that we're all very familiar with. We've dealt with this for several meetings, and hopefully we can put this one to bed tonight. But this is about policies for appointment to county committees and boards, and specifically about deadlines, limits, background checks, et cetera. So where we left off last time was a motion to defer the discussion to tonight. And do we need to go over how we got to where we are? Does everybody remember that? Does anybody have any place for us to start tonight? Commissioner Harris.
One of the things that we talked about that you were concerned with was about arrest record, and we can check felons. Sonia, is there any way we can just simply put, have you ever been arrested?
I believe that's on our application now. Now, it doesn't say if you've been arrested, it says if you've been convicted of any crimes. Just because somebody's arrested doesn't mean that they're guilty. But there is a box on there for them to check that says, have you been convicted or pled guilty to any crimes? And so if we rely on that, and then Ms. Stevenson could run the basic felony search and sex offender registry and meth registry and so forth like that for us, that would sure be a lot easier than doing the background checks. And cheaper, save a lot of money too. Commissioner Rather, you're recognized.
I just want to kind of touch on something that our county attorney that's divorcing us brought up in the last meeting. Sorry, Josh. That we were trying to figure out, okay, what disqualifies, what doesn't, who's going to determine this, who's going to determine that. If I remember correctly, that we talked more about that than I think any other aspect of this. And I remember Josh saying if you wanted to do it, I remember you using the word bucket. So after I thought about this, this is information that would come back to you because you're doing the background check, correct?
Ms. Stevenson, would you like to join our conversation? I probably have some more questions for you.
If we just did the felony check, which is any citizen can do a felony check, it's on the state of Tennessee's website. As long as you know what state they live in or have lived in, all the states have it. So a felony is a little bit different than a misdemeanor check. So it really just boils down to what you're looking for. if you're saying anybody who's ever had a felony would be excluded, then that puts everybody in the same bucket. It really just depends. But now I believe people can get felony charges that aren't necessarily, murder, and I don't know what all rises to a felony anymore, but Josh might could tell you.
Well, go ahead.
I can't tell you. There are all manner of things that can be felonies. Then therein lies, in my opinion, the whole problem with trying to get into describing specific actions that are okay and those that aren't, is that there's a litany of things that can be felonies, or there are even things where it's the same basic act, but one version of it's a felony and another is a misdemeanor. And so my caution last month, I think, was more about trying to avoid that conversation and putting Sonia really in the unfair position of having to discern which things are okay and which ones aren't. So that's where the buckets came in, is creating a broader bucket like felony. If that's the information you want to use, that is a category that she could check. And it wouldn't matter what felony, it wouldn't matter if it's not a bad one or one that you might not view as bad or whatever. If it's a felony, it would count under your scenario and they'd be out. And that'd be it. It wouldn't matter what it was.
Well, I've gone over this time after time since our last meeting, and we're not going to get anywhere anytime soon if we keep trying to break it down and all that. So, like me as an employer, if I see felony, I don't care what it is. I don't care what you did or anything. If it's there, you're out. So I don't want to make a motion just yet because I know there's going to be a lot of discussion, but I would head towards a motion here in a little bit that we move this forward with, if you've had a felony in the last 5 years or you're on the sex offenders registry, you're disqualified. That's not my form of a motion, but that's what I'm going to head to, depending on the discussion.
Any other discussion points or comments? Commissioner McAdoo.
Yeah, I'm going to voice mine that I voiced last month. In looking at the judicial system, if I go out and try to check backgrounds or whatever, so felony, misdemeanors or whatever, 9 times out of 10, the system may not even be updated. And then there I am looking at some outdated information, or some information that's not even put on the system about an individual in a short period of time. Because I think when we're trying to elect a person or something of this nature, that the background system that we're trying to check, it may not be correct. And here I am putting this information on this individual that it hadn't been updated is wrong. So I just don't like it at all myself.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Cush, you're recognized.
Thank you, Alan, for bringing that up. I've thought long and hard about this, and here's my conundrum. You have people that can run for county commissioner, for mayor, that can have all kinds of background issues, and nobody checks that. I mean, I had an opponent that had an arrest record, and it would be up to me to dig, and then I have to make the decision whether I want to take that public. So, I mean, until we're held to a higher standard, I'm not sure why I want to go to the expense, the county expense, and the trouble. I mean, this is still kind of a small town. People know each other. We can ask questions. If we ask for references like these applications did for IDB and for the district fulfillment, we can check references. That's free. I'm to the opinion that we just scratch the whole idea, and when somebody applies, we ask around, see who they know, ask their friends, and be done with it, because until the higher elected officials have to follow the same suit, I think it's a waste of time.
Any more discussion? And Commissioner Cush, I would remind you that anybody with a felony is probably not going to be allowed to run for public office.
Well, you can do some bad stuff, and depending on what judge you get, that can be expunged, and you can do hours and hours and hours of community service, but you've still done a bad thing, and it may not be on your record, but that still shows what kind of character you have. So,
any more discussion? Commissioner Reed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm somewhat in the same way of thinking right here. I think our current application, as I've said here, to look back on our Industrial Development Board application that they filled out, that's a pretty important position that we've just gone through here this evening. And I think some of the wording that we've talked about in the new application and what we're asking right here is sort of walking off in some deep weeds in what we're asking and what we're requiring. And I think we can work with what we have and what we've got. And I have somewhat of that same feeling.
Any other discussion on the background checks, criminal matters? All right, what about deadlines? We had talked last month and the month before about putting a deadline on people to turn in applications before the meeting. Is there any wish to move forward with that?
Yeah, I think it should be at least...
Have you talking to your microphone?
I think it should be at least minimum 48 hours. I'd like to see a week. I mean, we're giving them 30 days to apply. I feel like we're not asking too much to have it in a week before.
So is that in the form of a motion?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd like to have a motion that we make it a week on deadline.
So that would be 1 week before the steering committee meets?
Yes.
And then what if, so is there a second on that motion? Second. Commissioner Reed seconds. And I have a question. What if that Monday falls on a holiday? It would be the next business day by close by 4 o'clock. Okay.
Fine.
I think that's a very reasonable proposal.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, any more discussion?
Does that also mean then that we will no longer take any names from the floor?
Well, that would logically be part of it. If somebody doesn't turn their application in on time, it doesn't seem fair, but they could be nominated at the last minute on the floor. So that's actually a really good point.
Do we need to make that part of the motion?
That would be an amendment that you could offer.
I would make an amendment that we no longer accept motions from the floor.
Unless the person applied.
Unless their application has been in the appropriate time. It's submitted in the appropriate time frame as the new motion.
So we have a motion to amend the original motion, and the amendment is to prohibit nominations from the floor unless the person was an applicant that met the deadline. So is there a second on that motion?
A second.
Commissioner Harris seconds. Is there any more discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? So amendment passes. And we're back on the original motion now, as amended. Any further discussion on that? If there is no more, then all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Motion carries. Is there anything else we need to discuss on this topic, or can we finally move on from it?
Let's move.
Let's move on. Okay, our next item is going to be, let me get back to my agenda here, a policy for employee complaints about human resource or budget departments. Again, committee, you'll remember that last month, there was a discussion about what an employee should do, what does the handbook say, do we want to make changes to that? That was also deferred to this month's meeting. Do we need to go back and rehash how we came to talk about that, or does everybody remember the discussion from last month? So Commissioner Phillips, if you'd like to come or be recognized, you're recognized.
I have a resolution I'd like to present. It's not exactly on the topic of a policy of complaints, but it would affect that, I do believe. Let me just try to go back, and I'm talking exclusively at this point with our HR department. The HR department was founded, if I'm not mistaken, back in the late 90s? 2003. Okay, and there was a lot of discussion at the steering committee and at the full commission about reporting responsibilities. The major thought back at that time was that the commission did not want this position to be a political appointment. In essence, if a new mayor were to be elected, that position, especially if someone had been in there for a long time and was doing a good job, the mayor could not come in and make wholesale changes, so we didn't want to make it a political appointment. So it was set up to where this position would report to the commission through the steering committee. And it's probably worded a little bit differently than that, but that was the thought process that's gone on. And let me say that just recently, the only hiccup that's happened in that was a complaint that was lodged against our Human Resource Department. So it's kind of brought to light that maybe that Human Resource Manager department needs a boss, a supervisor. I talked with our county attorney somewhere about a month ago about possible scenarios that would kind of relieve this, what I think is maybe a fallacy in the policy. And together with the county attorney, we've come up with this resolution. I'm not saying that it's something that we absolutely positively have to do. There may be better ideas, but this is one that I think is important, especially since we're talking about it on the agenda, to maybe move forward with it. And I'd like to discuss that with you tonight. Let me just kind of run through these. All the departments in the county, like risk management, the ambulance service, planning, building codes, emergency management, solid waste, fire department, workhouse, IT, health department, probation department, archives, and our animal shelter, PAWS, all report to the mayor. And the human resource department is the only one outside of our financial department that does not report to the mayor. And the resolution that I'm going to present to you tonight deals with bringing the Human Resource Department under the umbrella of the mayor's office. In essence, the mayor would supervise this department. The oversight would still exist, in my mind, with the full county commission, because as this resolution reads, the county commission would still have oversight when it comes to making hiring decisions and/or firing decisions, terminating decisions. So from that perspective, we would also take out the politics that might be involved in the hiring or firing of that position of Human Resource Director. And I think you've got a copy of the resolution in front of you. Becky, did I give you one? And if you want me to, I'll read this resolution, and then you can ask any questions that you might have. And once again, I'm not saying that we have thought of everything in here, but Let me read the resolution, and then if you have questions, I might be able to answer it. Maybe the mayor might be able to answer it, or maybe even Sonia might be able to help us with it, in addition to Josh. Resolution, whereas Private Acts of 2003, Chapter 61, was adopted by the General Assembly to create an act known as the 2003 Human Resources Law, and whereas it is in the best interest of the citizens of Rutherford County that the Human Resources Law be amended to provide oversight of the Human Resources Department, shall be under the direction of the county mayor rather than the steering committee of the legislative body and/or the legislative body directly. Whereas provisions of the 2003 Human Resources Law providing that the steering committee or the county legislative body or other designated oversight committee, subject to the approval of the county legislative body, has the authority to appoint or dismiss a human resource director upon a 30 days notice and should be amended as provided herein. Now therefore be it resolved by the Rutherford County Board of Commissioners that it respectfully requests the Tennessee General Assembly amend the 2003 Human Resources Law as follows. A, the Human Resources Department will be under the oversight of the county mayor rather than the steering committee of the legislative body or the legislative body directly. B, Section 6 of the 2003 Human Resources Law be amended to provide that the county mayor, rather than the legislative body, steering committee of the county legislative body, or any oversight committee designed by the county legislative body, have the ability to appoint, dismiss, for cause, a human resource director upon 30 days written notice, subject to the approval of the county legislative body. And that the provisions of the 2003 Human Resources Law that conflict with Sections A and B above be further amended as deemed appropriate by the Tennessee General Assembly. Be it further resolved that upon passage of the Tennessee General Assembly, that the said amendment shall be presented to the Rutherford County Board of Commissioners for ratification. Be it further resolved that the county clerk is directed to send a certified copy of this action to the legislative delegation representing Rutherford County, Tennessee, with a request for passage by the Tennessee General Assembly at its earliest opportunity. Once again, I think that that would only leave the Finance Department as the only department that doesn't report directly to the mayor. And I don't have all the facts there, but back in, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Alan, you could probably even help me with this, but back in the late 1970s, I think that the Finance Department reported directly to the mayor, and there was some complications and some issues with that, and our legislative body changed that. And the Human Resources Department was set up entirely different than that, reporting to the legislative body through the steering committee. So I don't want to get those two departments confused tonight, so I just wanted to deal with this, the HR department tonight and not consider any other type of supervision outside of what we already have. I think if the commission wanted to discuss that, I think that might be appropriate, but I didn't really want to get into both of those departments tonight and maybe save a lot of time and effort and just deal with the Human Resources Department tonight. So that's my recommendation, and once again that the Human Resource Department would come under the umbrella of the county mayor, but the county commission will still have oversight when it comes to making employment decisions and termination decisions.
Any discussion? Mr. Harris.
So what about, can I ask you, how do you feel about this?
No, it's all, as I understood it when the position was created, it was to do several things. One is to make sure that you did keep the political appointments separate so that it kind of protected your HR director and your finance director. I'll tell you, like I've told Mayor Ketron and I told Commissioner Phillips, regardless of where my position is, I'm still going to do the job that you hired me to do. If a commissioner needs me for something, my door is always open. I will entertain any request or question or direction. I pride myself on working closely with the mayor's office and also with the finance and the risk management. We work very closely together, as well as the county attorney's office. So from my standpoint, my work ethic and the jobs that I do are not going to change. But I do believe that when it was originally created, it was created for the purpose of, saving the political side of it, that if a mayor came in with a specific agenda, that those two departments who oversee the employment and the one that oversees the finances would be protected. However, I do believe the way Commissioner Phillips has stated it, allowing the day-to-day interactions, which I believe are already happening anyways, from my viewpoint. I don't think I've given Mayor Ketron a hard time. I guess I'm just kind of in the middle. I'm going to do what you asked me to do regardless and try to do it to the best of my abilities. So.
Well, I looked at back in the minutes, and my question to you is, when's the last time the steering committee gave you a year-end review?
I've had one review since I've been here. Mayor Burgess did that at my request. I've been here for a couple of years and had not had one, and I wanted feedback, to try to determine how I've done my job. I have in the past interacted with the chairmans to ask for their feedback if there was anything in particular. In fact, recently I even spoke with Chairman Stevens and said, what are some things that you would like to see coming forward, just to try to make sure that I'm bringing forth the information that the steering committee may need or want. So as far as direction and a review, that hasn't happened, but I will also say that they're not happening across the board. We have tried multiple times to encourage departments to do annual reviews, and I do annual reviews on my employees, but all the departments don't do that, and so I wouldn't say that that's unusual, that there isn't one. But I do receive feedback from the committee and also from the mayor as well.
Any more discussion? Commissioner Cush.
Jeff, or Chairman Phillips, it is Monday, and it is the evening, and I've had a long weekend in Cancun, Mexico, for the marriage of my son, so things are a little hazy. Paragraph B, to me, reads opposite of what you said. Can you explain paragraph B one more time to me?
Josh and Sonia, both of you jump in here. Section B, if we can read that. Section 6 of the Human Resource Law provides that the county mayor, rather than the county legislative body or any other oversight committee, have the ability to appoint, dismiss for cause. That means that in my mind, that means that the county mayor would be the supervisor with a 30-day written notice subject to the approval. So to me, there's not a conflict there, Mike, but
well, here's how I'm reading it. What this amendment does is you're saying the county mayor, rather than the steering committee and legislative body, now has the ability to hire and fire
with the approval of the county commission.
Where does it say with the approval of the county? Subject to the approval of the county legislative body. Okay, last line. Okay. So at first you're saying we still have full ability to hire and fire, and now we're saying we're going to let the mayor do that if we agree to do that.
No. Josh, help me if I'm reading this wrong. What this thing says is that the county mayor will now supervise that department head.
Right, period.
And have the ability to hire or fire with the approval of the county commission.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is that how you read that as well?
That is how I read that section B.
So in essence, if we had an opening, I think the county mayor, and I can't speak for this mayor or any other future mayor, but the way the other 3 mayors, especially the last 2 that I've worked under, both of those county mayors have put together representatives from the county commission when it came to interviewing department heads. And I think that's a real smart thing to do. And with some conversation with this mayor, that would be the proposal that he would also handle. So the county legislative body would have input into the hiring process in a couple of different ways, the interviewing process and then the approval process.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm not 100% sure, Mike, that it is as clear as a bail, but it's got legal stuff in there that is, from what Josh and his department put together, needed to be, I think. Josh, did you have something?
No, I can offer a couple of comments. I think, first of all, it's important to remember the context of this resolution. So the Human Resources Law is a private act. So this resolution is nothing more than a request to Nashville to amend our private act. So sometimes, as you know, when we've amended private acts or passed private acts, you would have an exhibit, and it is, in fact, the entire private act. You don't see that here. What you have here is the suggested modifications to the private act. So in what exactly would happen in Nashville in terms of the exact amendment, I can't tell you, because this is just the request for the legislative delegation to make this amendment to the private act, first of all. That's the context of this resolution. Second, I think your discussion there, I hope, cleared up Section B. The way this came to me was, please help me draft a resolution that says this, and this was our effort at that. And I'll be the first to admit, perhaps it could be improved as we sit here and discuss it. But I think the intent of B is as stated by Commissioner Phillips, which is simply to say that right now, under the law, the steering committee and the legislative body has the right to hire and fire the human resources director. What B would do, at least the intent of B, was to say that that power is placed in the first instance under the mayor, who could hire or fire for cause, but only subject to the county legislative body. Now, what exactly does subject to the approval of the county legislative body mean? We've had that discussion before. It means you would have to approve it. Does that mean you could ask questions and all of that? That may be a policy issue that you need to resolve. But the big picture is it's just moving that immediate oversight from the steering committee and the legislative body to the county mayor. That's what came to me, and that's what we attempted to write here as best we could.
Once again, remembering back to when this position was created, it was not a unanimous decision to put that position under the steering committee and the legislative body. But the unanimous decision was of a definitive need for a human resource department. So to get the human resource department, some commissioners said, whatever it takes for us to get something in place. And once again, if my memory may not be exact, but I think the intent of that commission was to make sure that it was not a political appointment that could change at the whim of a new county mayor. And that's what this hopes, I hope, we hope, to continue, is that it would not be a political appointment. The deal with this is it would take a recommendation from the county mayor and approval by the county commission to remove someone. If you had such a desire to even add further protection for that position, you could even say instead of a simple majority, it could be a supermajority, which is normally 2/3. Once again, I don't know that that would ever come to that point, but who knows, it may at some point in time. So if you wanted to make that, to give further protection to that department, you could do that. I didn't see any need to really put that in there, but it would add further protection if you wanted to make that adjustment. Once again, I'm not saying that this is the most ideal situation, but I think for us as a county and the way our government will continue to grow, I do think that this position and that department needs to come under the umbrella of the county mayor, especially as we move forward in years. This committee may do an outstanding job in supervising that department, but it doesn't mean that the committee next year would, or the committee 4 years from now would. So I think that since we've been having the discussion on HR, now is an appropriate time to consider that change. Thank you.
Any discussion? Is there a motion or any discussion on Commissioner Phillips' proposal? Commissioner Rather.
Sonia, how long have you been in your position?
12 years, November 19th.
In the 12 years that you've been there, you're the HR director the whole 12 years?
Yes, sir.
Have you had issues or problem in the fact that you kind of reported to this body? Has that caused you some headaches or problems or issues at all?
Sure.
I just want to make a comment that I could make a better decision if I knew, and Commissioner Phillips, I think you made a comment that you think the intent was back then to take the politics out of this, so to speak. But I cannot find anybody that can come out and tell me for sure, you know, here was the documentation from 2003 and here's why we did it. So I don't want to say I'm opposed to this. To make a decision, I'd like to know why it was done before I vote to undo it. Does that make sense?
I think you're the third human resource director that we've had. And once again, in my mind, she's done an outstanding job. I think, and you may see it differently, and I'm not saying that the way that you see it would be wrong, but I think that this adds another layer of protection to that department. If there were a complaint about that position, under this scenario, that complaint should be filed to the mayor's office. Right now, that complaint would be filed before the committee itself, and you'd have at least seven commissioners looking at a complaint, trying to make decisions as to what to do about it. The mayor would make that decision, in my mind, the mayor would make that decision, which would probably lead to an immediate investigation of that complaint. So, to me, it would add a layer of protection. Now, Michael, I'm not saying that's accurate, but in my mind, that's what would happen.
Well, on the kind of on that same line of thought, we could have a mayor someday. There's been a few people that have run just about every time. It is possible that we get a mayor who, when they walk in and start firing people left and right, that's possible. So, to me, she's got one guy that has not total control, because I understand that he cannot, and I'm kind of confused by this too, where it says that have the ability to appoint or dismiss for cause. So I guess you can appoint for cause, or I don't know if didn't understand that part, but they could dismiss for cause, 30-day notice, approval by us. So if somebody could still fire her without cause, couldn't they?
I'm not even sure I understand that question, Michael. And let me just say once again, I think we're probably getting into a scenario that eventually may happen at some point in time. I don't foresee that happening, because an important phrase in there is with cause, that it can happen because someone doesn't like someone else, or there's a personality conflict, or they want someone in there that's their person. So they can't make a change unless there is a reason, a legal reason to make that change. And they still couldn't make that change without your approval.
I guess where I'm going with this is, right now, you're saying this is protection for her. She's reporting to the mayor. So I'm just going to throw a scenario out there that hopefully doesn't come true, but just a possibility that there comes a time where Mayor Ketron and Sonia are just not doing very well in the relationship, and he can fire her for cause with our approval. But if she reports to the steering committee, you've got 7 people up here that, if 2 are mad at her, and we were trying to vote to, somebody made the motion to fire her, if only 2 were mad at her, she's going to keep her job, because the other 5's going to vote in favor to keep her. So I keep going back and forth, and I'm not saying whether I support it or don't. I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around it. Why was it done this way? And here we are 16 years later, changing it. And I really understand what everybody's saying, but I can't get my mind in one direction or the other.
Michael, I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not sure that this is the best scenario, but it's the best thing that I could come up with in my mind, thinking through some of the problems that has arisen over the last 3 to 4 months. And the deal with the mayor, if you would ask Sonia, in her 12 years, she's probably considered the mayor the person that she goes to on a daily basis with questions and works more closely with that position than anybody else because the mayor is in that office every day. And I just think this adds some validity to that relationship, in my opinion. What you said also has some validity, okay? I just think that this is a better option. I do. Maybe you don't, and that's your call.
Like I said, I don't know yet. There's this side saying, okay, this side saying, this one's still asking questions. So I don't know yet.
Commissioner Harris, you're recognized.
Jeff, you read off a list of departments. They fall under the mayor, right?
That's correct.
Can the mayor fire them?
I'm assuming that the mayor would be like a CEO of any company, a manager of any company, and could probably make a termination at any time that they wanted to, he or she wanted to, under that scenario. But I'm also saying that if any mayor had half a brain and would fire someone without cause, would mean their immediate political downfall. I'm assuming that the commission would take certain steps to see that that didn't happen again. So
key word is cause.
That, in my mind, it is. And once again, there could be a reporting relationship to where that manager, in this case, it would be the mayor, was asking the department to do something, and that department manager refused to do it. To me, that's cause, even though that person may have been in there a long time. But I also think that the mayor would also have enough faith in the county commission to explain his actions. And in that case, it would not be a political type of a move. So yes, the mayor has, I think, the authority to do pretty much anything he wanted to do in those other departments. Those have been set up like that, as far as I know, forever. This department is still maybe even the newest department that we have, even though it's been around a little while. And I was on board when that happened, and my memory was it's still pretty clear that the reason that it didn't report to the mayor was simply for political reasons. We did not want that department to be subject to change without reason for it to be changed, in essence, non-political. So all of these other departments report directly to the mayor, and the mayor makes hiring and firing decisions. And I've also been around long enough to where the past two mayors have asked me, once again, because of my relationship to the steering committee and a background that I had in the private industry, to be involved in a number of interviewing processes. And after some conversation with this mayor, that's the intent of this mayor, is going forward when you have important hiring decisions to make, like I can remember us going through the probation department and hiring that. The mayor wanted the commission's involvement in that process. The Human Resource Department is involved in all of those decisions as well, sits in on those interviews, takes applicants, screens applicants, and starts scheduling those interviews. There would be no one to do that if we were talking about the Human Resource Department. So it would come back to the mayor to do a lot of that work, and I'm assuming that this mayor would live up to the expectations as he's laid out, that I can't talk about any future mayors. I can't. And I also can't talk about any future steering committee members either. You know, the steering committee is put in a position to make certain decisions that may not be decisions that they have a tremendous grasp on at the time, where the mayor is sitting in an office that has full knowledge of other departments and the relationship with those other departments. And since we are here a lot less time than the mayor is, I refuse to call us a part-time employee. But since we're here at least less time than the mayor is, the mayor has probably more knowledge and can do maybe a better investigation. And when it comes time to do investigations, that's what the human resources job is to conduct those or to have someone conduct those. But when it comes to this position, and I know that's what you're going to be talking about tonight, with this scenario, those complaints in my mind would go to the mayor, and then the mayor would make that decision as to how the investigation would take place. In my mind, it would go through the legal department.
Commissioner Reed, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I see that this resolution is something that each one of us have seen for the first time. And I can see that there is confusion among the committee here. Would it be possible that we take this under advisement, or give us time to digest it, I guess is what we're trying to say, and come back at a later time?
That is, we could defer it to the next month. Now, are you talking specifically about Commissioner Phillips' resolution or the whole discussion?
Whole discussion.
So is that the form of a motion then?
Form of a motion, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rather, second to defer this topic to the next month's steering committee. Is there any discussion on that? If not, I'm not sure that you can discuss the motion to defer anyway. So we've got a proper motion and a second to defer. I think that has to be voted on before we move
It has
forward.
to be voted on.
To defer it to the next month.
Oh. Didn't we just vote on?
We haven't voted yet. We have a motion and a second. So,
Okay. Yes.
so all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, let the record reflect that Commissioner Harris voted no. Commissioner Rather, you're
I
recognized.
have one really quick question for Commissioner Phillips. Is there a deadline?
You talking to your
on-
microphone, Commissioner?
Is there a deadline on filing this or getting it to the state?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There could be a deadline. We don't know when the General Assembly will close. But this type of resolution would be forwarded to the delegation. There has to be a member in the House and one in the Senate to carry it and file it, and it has to start making its way through the committee structure of both, and those will probably start closing down by the end of this month. So if you don't get it in, then you're going to have to wait for a whole year.
We've already voted to defer this to the next month, so, but we might not be able to make this change officially until the next legislative session, so. But that's just the way it is because we voted to defer. Okay, update for public records policy. Ms. Stevenson, we had some discussion about this last month, and what did we find out about that?
So last month, on page 6 of the policy, it was requested that under Section V, in item D, it says a requester will be allowed to make copies of records with personal equipment. A requester will be allowed to make photographs of records with a telephone, smart device, other camera, or photo-taking device. If copies are required for redaction, then fees may or may not still apply under Section 4, as may be applicable or based on guidance from the Tennessee Office of Open Records Council. That item was added back into the policy that was updated. The only question I would have that was not clarified was how many photos could a person take at one time? You know, are we talking 10, 20, 50? And that was the only question that wasn't resolved, but this is the updated.
But we had already voted on that policy in November 2017, and somehow it just didn't make its way into the change we made did not make its way into the policy.
Correct.
So it's in there now in the official version, and so we need to decide what's a reasonable amount of copies, and then the other minor technical changes that you had made, that you had talked to us about last month,
Like
which I think was
updating
just...
the website. We updated the website, multiple people that it could be sent to, phone number, fax number, added those things in. So all of those changes have already been updated, and Josh has already reviewed the policy, and he and I have talked about it and discussed and made all the changes.
But what's your recommendation for a reasonable number of copies if you have to redact? Just want to follow 10 like they currently do for if
Yes,
they make
sir.
paper copies?
I would prefer that it be 10 because that's the same that it is for our current copies, that they get those free, and so therefore they could take 10 pictures of 10 copies if they so chose.
Is there a motion to approve the updated policy with those changes?
I make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Harris makes a motion to approve the updated policy with those changes we discussed. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rather, any further discussion on this topic? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Human Resources Budget. Ms. Stevenson passed out some copies, and I think it's on the SharePoint site, too.
One of the first things I wanted to talk to you about, I laid some copies on your table. Some of the commissioners are new, and some people don't understand exactly what all takes place in the Human Resources Department. So there's a HR snapshot that I laid on your table. This is just from the year of 2018. These are items that our office oversees and handles. It's not everything that we do on a daily basis, but it is a snapshot of the things that we do. The year-to-date column tells the number of interactions for that specific item. So where it goes for ADA, that could be courtroom assistants, that would be where we were getting interpreters for courts or to receive services, having items translated. So we had 48 different interactions for ADA assistance. Under the administrative tasks, those are things that are just day-to-day, whether it's a safety check, doing some administrative tasks. So we have 277 of those unique items. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but the ADA, benefits, events, leave, legal, offboarding, onboarding, promotions, recruitment, testing, Title VI, and training are all items that are unique to the employee population, and that means that we have interaction with them on a day-to-day basis or as needed for this. I added up just to see how many interactions that our office would have had for these particular items, and there were 10,031 in the year of 2018. That's whether we processed applications, we onboarded them, did training, orientation classes, retirement sessions, special promotions, offboarding, wherever we did exit interviews. And I wanted you to have a copy of this just to see that while it sounds like most people think all we do is handle personnel files, we do a lot of other different things. And so it could be that we're helping people get in for their scholarships or an EAP referral. There's many different things. And if anybody ever wants to see the full report, I have the breakout of each of these, but I wanted to give you a snapshot to see if this was something you'd want in the future and to let you know what we did last year on a month-by-month basis. So this is one of the items just for your review, and if you'd like to see it in the future, I'll be happy to bring it. The other item that I laid on your desk, Commissioner Stevens had asked that I bring information related to turnover. Let me make sure I've got the right. a turnover report just to see what the turnover has been in the HR department in the last 10 years. If we look uniquely like we do for other departments, if somebody, there's oftentimes somebody will be working in the juvenile detention center, and maybe they'll transfer to the sheriff's office because they want opportunity to advance, and there's not necessarily a lot of opportunity to advance in the juvenile. It's a smaller department, and so when you have a smaller department, it's not uncommon for employees within that department to say, okay, there's only so many positions above me. If I'm the low man on the totem pole, I either wait till somebody leaves or I transfer out. So if you look at total turnover, there would have been 12 in the last 10 years. However, 5 of those individuals transferred to other departments for promotions. So I don't consider those, true turnover items. They stayed within the county. They went for a promotion. Of the 7 that left in the last 10 years, those individuals left. One of the individuals left because they were having a baby and wanted to stay home. Another individual left. Her husband was sick, and she retired and said she was going to stay home to take care of him and to travel as they needed. I had one employee went to the town of Smyrna. It was a lateral move, but it was more money for that individual. One individual went to be the HR director for Wilson County Government. Another one went to be the HR director for Premier Parking. Another went to back to MTSU, a promotion over one of the dean's classes, and so they were helping with that. So of those 7, all of them but one left for a promotion or for a reason that they so chose. So all turnover is not bad turnover. When you develop somebody and you prepare them to be promoted, I take great pride in making sure that my team has that opportunity, and so I'm very proud that they went on to be directors or was able to go to other departments. So that is the turnover report for both for the HR department in the last 10 years. Are there any questions related to that? Another request from the chairman about the percentage of salary changes in the department for the positions over the last 10 years, what their entry level was 10 years ago versus where it is today. And I did that, but I also gave you a packet to show, since many of you will be on other committees, whether it be public safety or budget or what other committees. This is a list of every job title in the county and the percentages that position has changed in the last 10 years. If it says years in position is 1 or 2 or 3, that means it's a new position, or that's how long the position has been around. So in addition to giving you the HR numbers, which are on the front page for your easy viewing, it also includes all the other departments and positions in the county so that you would have that for your future meetings. Are there any questions about that? Okay. On to my budget then. Look on your iPads, there is a tab that is called Human Resources Budget, and it will be the budget progression. I do this every year, and I've done this since I've been here, just to show how much the budget has increased or changed year over year. This is all the items outside of those related to compensation. So if it has anything to do with taxes or their overall salary, these are items that are the daily operations of the department. I've included these year over year just to show what we are using the monies for. The last column says budget request versus current and the difference, and you notice at the bottom it has it's highlighted in yellow, $5,680, which means that it is $5,680 more than the last year's budget. And the reason for this being more is because of the drug screening. For anyone that's on the budget committee knows that for the testing line, not just drug screening, but for the testing line, we had to ask for a budget amendment this year to increase our budget by $10,000 because of the testing for the physicals. It's not just drug testing, but it's physicals, it's MMPIs, it's the background checks, anything that relates to a new employee, a volunteer. We also do this with our volunteers as well. Our interns that come in, that's what that money's used for. If we had not raised, so I raised my budget this year, so hopefully I would not have to come back for a budget amendment. Had we not had to raise that budget, the bottom line would have been $5,495 less than last year's budget. So with the trend, I think you'll see that bottom line shows my difference between years. Every year I've tried to either improve from the year before or stay pretty close in the same budget that I've had ever since I've been here almost. So to the actual budget itself, which I handed out to you, the only real large changes is the evaluation and testing. I did ask for an additional $500 for the copier line for the maintenance agreements. Our copiers are old, really, really old, and so they are needing more repairs, so I just added in an extra $500 to assess with that. The NeoGov line, I increased by $1,300. I've been advised that there would be a 4% increase on our agreement this year, and so I put it in the budget. It's not due till October, but I wanted to make sure it was in there and not have to make a budget amendment. Employee recognition is the event. That line includes employee recognition and scholarships. That line, the reason it's going down is because the group is going to be smaller. This past year, we had 135 recipients that attended the employee recognition dinner, but we won't have as many this upcoming year. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions about Ms. Stevenson's proposed budget? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to accept her budget.
Second.
That's to forward it on to the Budget Committee.
That would be correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner, you're recognized.
Sonia, going back to the off-boarding category, you said you do exit interviews. How are those handled, and who are those shared with?
Right now, we do the exit interviews in multiple ways. We are about to add it onto the NeoGov system where it'll do it electronic and it'll send them a questionnaire. Currently, if we know in advance, we would prefer to do the exit interviews in person because we can ask some follow-up questions. I mean, it's really hard if you get a piece of paper in the mail or if you go online to answer a question. It doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for interaction to say, well, what does that look like, or how could we do it better, those type things. Lindsay, who is my HR generalist, conducts those exit interviews for me. And so she will set those up. If we know that somebody's leaving in advance, we will do them in person. If we find out and there's not enough time to get them scheduled to get in before their last day, because sometimes we don't find out till a day or two before that they're leaving, then we will send them a letter to their home. And if we have their email address, we will follow up with the email. We try to get those back. What we do then is we take the exit interviews and see what they talk about that we could do better, and we will cover that with the departments if it's something that they can change, in their processes or, their interactions, or many times it's I don't like the schedule, or I'm moving out of town, or I'm going back to school. And sometimes it's about money, that they're going somewhere for a greater opportunity, or that they didn't think the job was, what they expected, those type things. But we do share those with the departments if it's something we feel like that they can change and make better for their department.
Curiosity, on the Sheriff's Department, do you have a pretty good participation in exit interviews?
Honestly, I'd have to go back and check all of those. We've just, I don't know if the Sheriff's Office is doing some of their exit interviews already. We've just started doing their onboarding process for them, and we had not been doing that before. And so we're just now doing the new hire process, not the exit process for their department.
So they handle their own offboarding? Okay.
Okay, let's move on to our next item, which is the litigation list. You'll find that. Yes, Commissioner Reed.
I'd just like to comment on this budget. For those of them that may be watching or whatever, we're looking at only about an $18,000 increase, I think is what I figured here. And I just want to commend you for keeping that budget where you've kept it and what you've had to do with it. And I think the increases only relate back to, like you said, on your copying machines and things of that type. So appreciate you watching that budget real close.
Okay, the next item is our litigation list. You'll find that on your iPads. Does anybody have any questions about the items on that? It's there for your review. So number 12 is discussion of Office of County Attorney. So we all heard the bad news that Josh McCrary will be leaving us as of April 1st or so to go work for a different company. And so that leaves us in a position to where we will have to decide how we're going to move forward. And we're not in a situation that gives us an urgent, we don't have to make a decision tonight on what we want to do. We have an acting attorney that will take Josh's place until we decide what we're going to do. That's Nick Christensen. He's here tonight with Mr. McCrary. So he will be the acting interim attorney until this commission decides which direction that we want to go. And I was going to recommend that instead of trying to hash this out tonight and make a decision, that we have a special called meeting in a few weeks, and that way we can devote the whole meeting to this topic and decide as a group which direction we would like to go or which directions we want to explore, since we don't have an urgent decision facing us tonight. And I had asked Mr. McCrary and Mr. Christensen about some dates that would work for them, and they gave us March 18th and March 20th. That's a Monday night and a Wednesday night. And is there any preference for those?
I like Monday.
Monday night, I would prefer Monday. Yeah, people have church on Wednesday night. I would prefer Monday too myself. So if Monday the 18th is available and there's no conflict with the judicial or with our courthouse here, would everybody be okay with having a meeting to discuss this topic on that day? Or is there any objection to that? Okay. It will be at 5:30. Mm-hmm. All right, so there'll be no objection, and we'll see if we can make that happen. Okay, so we're at the last official item on our list, and that is number 13, discussion of commission chairman structure. Members, I passed out a little handout of some research that I had done over the past few weeks, and I wanted you to have a chance to look over that. How this came to be was 8 years ago when I first came to the commission. One of the first questions that I had was, why is the executive branch running the legislative branch too? And nobody has ever been able to give me a reason other than we've always done it that way. The sky's going to fall if we change. It's too scary. We don't want to consider it. Let's just keep it the way it is because it's working. We have responsibilities that are outlined for us in the state law. The mayor's office has responsibilities that are outlined for him in state law. We have a constitution that has separation of powers. I would like to consider moving forward and have the commission be an independent branch of government like most of the other large counties do. In fact, we're the only quote-unquote large county that does things this way. I went to Knoxville and Chattanooga on Friday to look at their county commissions, and they are way ahead of us with the way that they do things. Their information is very available. It's much easier to find, and they both couldn't believe that we do things the way we do here. Because they thought that it violated the separation of powers, and they said their mayor focuses on his day-to-day job instead of running the county commission things. Those commissions also have, as you'll see on your information, a support staff that works for them as administrative or legislative assistants. And I spent some time with those people in addition to talking to the chairman, and they too were shocked. In fact, one laughed that we rely on the mayor's assistants to do our correspondence and so forth. So we're a growing large county now. We are number 5, soon to be number 4 if we're not already. We need to function like one and take responsibility for our department, for our branch of government. I would like to know for people that want to keep it the way it is, what's a good reason for keeping it that way other than we've just always done it that way. And then also in your packet there, you're going to find some job descriptions that I was able to gather up from those other counties to see what those employees do and the type of support services that they provide for their commissioners. I talked to the chairman there. They both said that their counties get along just fine, that they have a good relationship with the mayor, and in fact the mayor comes to all the meetings and gives input. And he's recognized as a non-voting member of every committee and also of the full commission by state law. So they said really he's just as engaged there, but he's able to focus on the day-to-day things, and that the county commission's able to focus on making policy. So I was going to recommend that we consider if we want to move forward with that, like the other large counties, or if we want to keep it the way it is. Is there any discussion? Do you want a copy of that? Commissioner Cush, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, should we proceed with that direction? When would all that go into effect?
So the state law says that in September of each year, the legislative body is charged with electing a chairman and a chairman pro tem. So nothing would officially change until September 1st. In our meetings in August, we actually elect the chairman and the pro tem, and then we vote for them again in September to be in compliance with the law. Commissioner Allen, would you like to say something?
There is a lot to talk about with this, so I'll just get the conversation going because I'm sure you all have plenty of thoughts as well. But as Commissioner Stevens and I have talked about this a little bit, and I've done my own research and really given it a lot of thought for many months. You know, there were several of us who thought that it was probably a good idea to make this change at this last election because it can be considered as an affront to your sitting mayor if you do it while they're there. And that was really never the intent. And so I apologize if that's going to be how it's going to be perceived because that's not the case at all. Because there were so many changes coming on board, we didn't pursue making these changes now and decided to kind of, just stay with status quo. But some things have come up recently as I've done my research that have really made me think about this in a much more serious way. Commissioner Phillips alluded to it earlier that we had a complaint that was filed against our HR department. And because the HR reports to this committee, it was not handled properly. This committee was not informed. And that's not really anybody's fault because we don't have a process in place for how that should have been handled. So let's talk through that for just a second. When you've got the mayor who's responsible for all the other departments except for HR and finance. And the reason that was set up that way, and Commissioner Rather, this is to your point, my understanding, it's always been explained to me, it was set up that way to insulate HR and finance from elections. These two positions, previous commissions felt like it was important that they be able to stand up and say no to that mayor for whatever reason, if they felt like something needed to be handled a certain way. They needed that autonomy, but with still accountability, and the accountability was to the full commission. When you've got your mayor, who's also your chairman, these two positions that you created to be independent, to have that autonomy from the mayor's office, really no longer have that autonomy. Because if he's the chairman and he's the mayor, these people have to serve the same person. So the very person you were trying to, insulate them from is now somebody that they're beholden to. So that was the first thing that kind of put it on my radar, that this is really, that's problematic. Just that design alone, in my mind, is problematic. The other thing is, and this has kind of even been a more growing concern for me as I've thought about it. Okay, in the absence of the mayor, if something, God forbid, should happen to Mayor Ketron, the Constitution is written in such a way that the constitutional authority is then given to the chairman of the commission to act in his stead. Mr. Sandlin, as his deputy, is really his chief of staff. He has no constitutional authority to act or behave in any way on the mayor's behalf whatsoever. That falls to the chairman of the commission. In this case, our chairman is also our mayor. So you're losing two positions at once. You're losing a mayor and you're losing a chairman. So now that falls to the chairman pro tem to fill in that role. When you think about it, you need to have somebody who is so actively engaged and so actively involved in the business of this county, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but active enough and engaged enough in the process so that if something should happen to the mayor, they can still operate this county until we can figure out what to do to fill that position. And so that's a really big deal. We've kind of been gambling with that by having the system that we have now. So when you talk about what are some of the reasons that this makes sense, I'm just a very logical, common sense kind of person. That's the path that I follow. And so based on my personal research, the risk is very high to not have this position. Commissioner Stevens, his concern has always been one more from a procedural, governmental, organizational structure, and I respect that as well. But my research has led me to the idea of some real-life application issues of problems that can happen in having this position combined. So those were just a couple of things I wanted you to think about and would love for you to discuss. I'm eager to hear your thoughts about them to see if those are any areas that cause you concern as well. So that's just what I had to share. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or I'm happy to sit back down.
Commissioner Harris?
This is a lot.
Yeah.
This is a lot. And Ms. Allen, I am not comfortable making a decision right now. I mean, I'm totally, we got a 15-year problem with HR, and then how long was Mayor Burgess mayor?
12 years.
12 years, he's chairman? What about the mayor before that, was she chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to hear more about this, a lot. I think it's a lot more. I mean, just your packet alone is something that I just don't want to take lightly. I want to take very seriously, so I yield.
Commissioner McAdoo?
He asked some questions about the chairmanship in the past, and we have worked under a chairmanship where a commissioner was chairman, and that was in 1978. Floyd Wilson was the chairman. Ben Hall was elected county mayor, but so we elected Floyd to be chairman over the commission and run what you're talking about. Another situation you brought up, under Ben Hall McFarland, he became ill and had to give up his position as county executive, and the county commission appointed an individual to run the county until we were able to get another county executive. I agree with my fellow commissioner over there that more research in the history of this county need to be brought up also, so each commissioner will know what we're talking about. Commissioner Stevens went to Hamilton County. I don't know where he went. It doesn't make me any difference, really. But if he was so gung-ho on that, why didn't he ask some of the other commissioners to go with him?
Well, you're welcome to go anytime.
That wasn't done. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is that we need a complete package of the history of this commission before we start making changes. And we're not getting it. We're not getting it. You brought up situations you never heard of, but they happen. It wasn't presented tonight, but they happen. So I think that each commissioner, especially on steering committee, should get a complete package, just not from Hamilton County, Knox County, or whatever. We should get a complete package of what has happened here in Rutherford County. And under some of these things you're bringing up, we may have tried them in the past, and for some reason they didn't work. And we went back to the original situation we're in now. So that's my thought of it. No way in the world I can make a decision tonight just based on this. I'd have to have time to study it myself. You went to Hamilton and Knox, I may want to go to Shelby. I might be looking at, if we got to do that, why don't we look at a metro form of government? Maybe why don't we look at cutting the commissioners from 21 to 7? Because I think it's only 9 in Hamilton. I think it's only 13 in Shelby.
That's correct.
And, all these facts should be brought out to me before we try to make a decision like this.
Y'all are done with me, I'm going to sit down. Okay.
Thank you. Well, and the reason that I brought this, Mayor Ketchern, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, let me share a few things with you that under Rule 3 of the County Commission, the minutes of the committee meetings, the county mayor shall keep a file of all committee meeting minutes for a period of no less than 2 years. Under secretarial, under item E, secretarial assistance, the county mayor shall, upon request, provide secretarial assistance to the committees of the commission during the regularly scheduled hours of the county mayor's office. Then Ms. Vicki Taylor in the county mayor's office prepares the agendas in coordination with the county mayor and chairman of each respective committee. For purchasing, property management, public safety, health and ed, steering, public works, and county commission. Mrs. Taylor also attends the purchasing committee meetings and takes the minutes. Becky Scarlett is assigned to the Becky's up there. She's assigned to attend the meetings and takes the minutes of property management, public safety, health and ed, steering, and public works. She then works for the county attorney to prepare the resolutions for the county commission, which is, I guess, what you're suggesting that you hire a separate secretary for, that she's already doing. Then Mark Tucker in the finance department prepares the budget committee agenda in coordination with the finance director and budget chairman, and he attends and takes minutes for the budget committee. The county commission agenda is prepared by Vicki Taylor in the county's office, and the minutes are taken by Rick Spence in the county court clerk's office. So when you shared this with me last week, Mr. Chairman, I asked the simple question: what are you not getting now that you want from the mayor's office? I think Ms. Taylor, she responds to everybody. She sends them emails, reminds them when their agendas are due, call in so she can prepare that. She sends you text messages, different members text messages to let them know that their meeting is coming up, and then calls them to remind them to look at your text message. So Vicki does quite a good job of responding to the commission of the mayor's office. In my 6 months, I haven't seen any deficiency. So if it's the will of this commission to grow government larger, then I ask, where are you going to put that person? You have to provide space, you have to buy office equipment, and then what are they going to do when they're not just answering questions of the 21 commissioners? Or do you actually want to grow government larger than what it is? I'm not sure that some will, but it's something to consider as you move forward and taking this consideration. If there's something I'm not doing as your chairman, then let me know. But if you just think that because you want separation or you want to sit in that seat, then that's your prerogative, if you can get the votes to do that.
Well, I'm a big believer in the Constitution, and I know you are too, and I'm trying to understand why we would follow it everywhere else except in this situation.
Well, I talked to CTAS today because today is Government Day on the Hill in Nashville, and I talked to CTAS, and every 4 years they contact all 95 counties, and they'll ask a series of questions. How many commissions have a member of the commission actually as chairman? how many do not. So they're starting, I think, just this next month, they'll start compiling that information. So I think there's plenty of time for this to be looked at. They should have their report back by the 1st of June, if, but if you want to change your rules and go a different direction, that's up to the 21 commissioners. But if there's something in the meantime I'm not doing and my mayor's office is not doing, please let me know. Okay, thank you.
I think Commissioner Allen said it very well, that it's not a personal issue, it's a principal issue. We have separation of powers. Each branch has a different function, and I believe that with this group of commissioners that we have now, that we have talent on here to step up and meet the responsibilities that we're charged with by law.
Well, in the beginning of her comments, there was said that there was some things in the last few weeks that weren't handled correctly. That was not correct, and I'll take challenge to that because that was a reflection on my office. And if you'd like to get into that, I'll be happy to get into that tonight with you. But Ms. Allen, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I got a pretty good idea of a delay of starting the investigation between HR and the risk management department. That was not my delay. And before you start making accusations, Mr. Chairman, that it was my delay, you don't know why the delay was occurred before we went out and hired an attorney to start the investigation between HR and Mrs. Street that we're now having to pay. So I'm sure, have you discussed that with your committee up here as chairman of what you're doing, and that you have personally selected the attorney to be representing the county?
I did not personally select that attorney. CTAS recommended that attorney for us.
All right. That was a recommendation, right?
It was a recommendation from CTAS.
Have you informed the rest of your committee that you're doing that?
They are aware, yes. Ma'am? We have someone, CTAS didn't hire an attorney. CTAS recommended one to look into this situation.
The day that I received the contract assigned to hire the attorney was the day that it was submitted back to the attorney's office. Just to set the record straight.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Harris.
Again, this is a lot. I would like to make a motion to defer this to next month.
You have a motion to defer. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Cush, second. All in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll put that on next month's agenda. Is there any other business to come before this committee?
Can I add something?
Yes, you're recognized.
Okay, when we would defer it, I'd like Ms. Allen and you or whoever's, I'd like to have, kind of like Commissioner McAdoo said, a little bit more information. Can we get that?
Well, what exactly do you want us to provide?
I don't, everything. I'd like to, make sure I'm completely informed on this. This is a pretty big thing, and I want to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. That's all. That's what I'm asking for, Commissioner Stevens, is I want to get more information. I know you gave us a lot from Hamilton and Knox, but I'd like to see more as far as Rutherford County, kind of like what Mr. McAdoo said.
Well, what information would you like us to provide?
I'd like to see how long we've had a mayor as commissioner chairman.
Okay.
I'd like to see that. Mainly that, just that. Is that good enough?
Oh, we can definitely provide that. Commissioner McAdoo, what exactly would you like us to provide?
What I like for you to provide to this commission, to this committee, is the setup that we have ran in the past in Rutherford County. For example, the chairman of the commission, and also I would like for you to bring up and Commissioner Allen spoke on it, but what she was speaking on, something she never heard of, whatever, but it has been done in this county. Who would take over the county as county mayor if
That's in your
something
packet.
happened? That has happened
That's in your
past.
packet.
That has happened in the past. The county, how did they do a summary of that? What did happen? What happened when we had a chairman, a commissioner that was chairman? Because we had Chairman Floyd, and we had a county mayor, Ben Hall McFarland. So why did the commission go back to the original situation? It's probably in the minutes why. You know, if you dig up those minutes, you'll see why. Because as I recall, we had 21 commissioners. It was hard to get 21 commissioners together to make a decision because we had a chairman over the court that had more power than our county mayor. So every time we had to make a decision, we had to try to get 21 commissioners together, no matter where they worked or whatever, to come in and make a decision. And those things, and it's a lot that was in there that happened when we were running a chairman of the commission as one of the commissioners. So it's in the minutes.
We will make a thorough search. Commissioner Allen.
I just want to say one last thing. If I implied that Mayor Ketron had done something improper with this investigation, I want to publicly go on the record and say that was not, when I mentioned the delay earlier, I'm talking about from the delay from the time that the complaint was initially filed. My comments were in no way a reflection on you or your office. So I just want to publicly apologize for that if that was misunderstood.
Yeah, I knew that's what you meant, but I let it roll off my back, okay? Is there any other business to come before the commission?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Reed.
I know that we're having a call meeting come the 18th. If anyone could have some of this material available at that time?
We can do our best and search through the archive and see what we can find.
If anything was available at that time, it might help speed some of this along and take care of some of it.
We'll look for it and see if the things they did in 1978 will help us today in 2019, okay?
I like to be prudent and use what time we have, because I don't think it's going to take all that time dealing with the...
Well, the special call meeting will just be for the attorney, but we can provide whatever information for you to study. Okay. Any other business? If not, then we're adjourned.